Chapter 327. Blood spilled from Wei Chongling's arm. At the same time, cold sweat streaked across his head. He had not expected that he would almost be crippled by two physical invulnerability experts. Just now, if he had been just a hair away, his arm would have been cut off by Tangya's blade. Without another word, Wei Chongling turned and fled, not caring about his face as an inspector. If they continued to fight, Wei Chongling did not dare to gamble on whether Tangya and Yen Bugue would dare to kill him. He only had one life. Seeing Wei Chongling flee, Yen Bugue frowned and immediately wanted to give chase. However, he was stopped by Tangya. "Do not chase. I am exhausted. You alone cannot catch up to him. Also, official has not come out of seclusion. You are not really preparing to kill him." Yen Bugue was skilled in strength, and he was only skilled in strength. If Wei Chongling wanted to run, Yen Bugue could not catch up. Also, their statuses were different. If they killed Wei Chongling, they would be committing a crime against their superiors. At least from the perspective of the Guanzhong torture room, they could not stand. Hearing Tangya's words, Yen Bugue put down his heavy sword and slowly tied it to his back. Tangya turned to the Ghost Hand King and said, "I think the Wei family will not let this go. We captured the person and lost face for the Wei family. Wei Chongling came to ask for the person, and we seriously injured him. This is a slap to the face of the Wei family. The Wei family will not tolerate this." The Ghost Hand King snickered and said, "No rush. Official will probably come out of seclusion at that time. Do you think the Wei family can rise in front of official?" When Tangya thought of Chu Xiu's murderous nature, he could not help but nod. In reality, Chu Xiu's reputation was greater than the Guanzhong torture room in the outside world, especially around the eastern Qi Jizhou government. If it was the local martial arts factions of the Jizhou government, those with similar strength to the Wei family, they would not even have the courage to challenge Chu Xiu. If the Wei family had learned their lesson, they might restrain themselves. Unfortunately, once Chu Xiu decided to teach them a lesson, the price they would have to pay would be the destruction of their families. Chu Xiu did not know what was happening in the outside world. After nearly a month of seclusion, Chu Xiu had stepped into the Five Qis origin realm. The increase in strength that the Five Qis origin realm brought to Chu Xiu wasn't as earth-shaking as when he reached the physical invulnerability stage of 3 flowers at one's prominence. However, the power in Chu Xiu's body had become more balanced, making his qi more perfect. A martial Dao grandmaster once said that heaven and earth were a big world, and the human body was a small world. Practicing martial arts was to cultivate oneself, and comprehending the Dao was to comprehend heaven and earth. Chu Xiu's essence, qi and spirit became one, and the 5 elements in his 5 viscera circulated, connecting their heads and tails, reaching a very delicate balance. The total amount of spiritual qi had increased a little, but not by much. However, when Chu Xiu attacked again, his explosive power, control of spiritual qi, and recovery ability were much stronger than when he was at the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. After stepping into the 5 Qis origin realm, Chu Xiu did not immediately come out of seclusion. Instead, he studied the heaven sun gazing at air technique. Unfortunately, although he had made a breakthrough in his realm, the heaven sun gazing at air technique did not improve at all. This strange technique still needed to be comprehended by observing heaven and earth, or comprehending the Tao during a battle to make a breakthrough. The real function of the heaven sun gazing at air technique was to predict the changes of heaven and earth. Previously, when Chu Xiu used the heaven sun gazing at air technique to see through his opponent's flaws, it was actually just a small skill that he had just learned. It was said that when the heaven sun gazing at air technique was cultivated to great success, the user would be able to tell how many breaths it would take for a breeze to blow a leaf off a tree, and where it would fall. The karma calculation was simply terrifying. It was a world of difference from the current cultivation of Chu Xiu, who had just started. Seeing through his opponent's flaws and hoping that his opponent would make a mistake would only be considered passive. If his opponent was extremely calm and did not make the slightest mistake when attacking, Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air technique would be useless. The last battle with Feng Wuling was purely a fluke. Feng Wuling's state of mind had too many flaws. If it had been a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm, even if their strength was not as strong as Feng Wuling, As long as their state of mind had no flaws, Chu Xiu's battle would have been a disaster. Therefore, right now, Chu Xiu still had to cultivate the heaven's sun gazing at air technique to small success. Only then would he be able to show the true power of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. Stepping out of seclusion, Chu Xiu's movements immediately attracted the attention of Ghost Hand King and the others. Congratulations to Sir for entering the 5 energies gathering realm. Your strength has improved greatly. Ghost Hand King and the others congratulated with joy. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "No need to be so courteous. Who attacked in the patrol hall previously?" Although Chu Xiu had been in seclusion before, he was not in a life-or-death seclusion. At such a close distance, he could naturally sense the movements outside. However, Ghost Hand King knew his limits. Since he did not go to find Chu Xiu to come out of seclusion, it proved that he could still control the situation. Therefore, Chu Xiu did not immediately come out of seclusion. Instead, he split a part of his attention to sense the movements outside. If things changed, he would be able to rescue in time. However, the auras of the battle later came. Tang Ye and Yin Bugui had worked together to defeat the enemy. Chu Xiu could sense this, so he did not intervene and continued to seclusion. At this time, if Wei Changling knew all this, he would probably be laughing up his sleeve. This was because Tang Ye and Yin Bugui had worked together to defeat him. Otherwise, Chu Xiu would have personally acted. Once Chu Xiu came out of seclusion, the matter would not be able to be resolved. At the very least, Wei Changling would not be able to walk out of the Jianzhou patrol hall. After Ghost Hand King explained the matter to Chu Xiu, he asked, "Sir, I feel that the Wei family will not let this matter rest. How should we deal with this matter?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Go cripple Wei Chun and teach him a lesson so that he will know what to say in the future. As for the Wei family, do not care about them. If the Wei family dares to attack again, I do not mind making the Wei family disappear from Guanxi. This is something that will happen sooner or later." Ghost Hand King nodded. He had guessed correctly about Chu Xiu's personality. Chu Xiu was very domineering. As expected, this was the result in the end. Of course, while Chu Xiu was domineering, he only dared to be domineering when he had absolute power. When he had just joined the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu's attitude towards Guan Siyu and Wei Jiuduan could be said to be very respectful. At this time, on the Wei family side, when Wei Changling brought the news back to the Wei family and recounted the matter, Wei Mok was immediately enraged. He smashed the teacup in his hand and shouted, "Idiot! You can't even handle such a small matter." Wei Changling said with a sad face, "Patriarch, it is not that I held back. Tang Ye and Yin Bugui, who are under Chu Xiu, are really abnormal. Although they are only in the physical invulnerability realm, they can already stand shoulder to shoulder with a 3-flower realm martial artist. With the 2 of them attacking me, and with so many martial artists watching from the Jianzhou prefecture, I could not use my strength at all." In order to make his defeat look more dignified, Wei Changling exaggerated the scene several times. He made it sound like Tang Ye and Yin Bugui were directly attacking Chu Xiu. Wei Mok frowned and turned to the back residence where the Wei family patriarch was in seclusion. Wei Mok was a little uncertain now that such a thing had happened. He needed to discuss it with the patriarch. In the back residence of the Wei family patriarch frowned when he heard this. He sighed and said, "The Wei family wants to keep a low profile, but we still have to act now. It is impossible for the Wei family to back down from a small matter like this." Wei Mok nodded and said, "Originally it was only Wei Chun, a junior, who insulted Chu Xiu. In the end, Chu Xiu's subordinates were very domineering. They actually crossed the border and brought him back to the Jianzhou prefecture. Now Wei Changling went once and returned in defeat. He was also seriously injured by Chu Xiu's subordinates. This hatred is already big enough. If the Wei family backs down now, we will lose even more face." The Wei family patriarch stood up and said, "Let's go. Come with me to see Wei Jiuduan." Wei Mok said in surprise, "Wei Jiuduan can still control Chu Xiu now." The fact that Wei Jiuduan and Chu Xiu were not on good terms with each other had already spread throughout the entire Guanxi. Everyone knew that Chu Xiu's influence had already grown, and that he could even stand up to Wei Jiuduan as an equal. The Wei family patriarch said coolly, Even if he cannot control it, he must. I have interacted with Wei Jiuduan for so many years and understand his personality. This person is narrow-minded and greedy. His desire for power is especially great. If other people encountered a subordinate like Chu Xiu, they would most likely not be enemies with him since they are nearing retirement. Would it not be better to form a good relationship with him? But if it is Wei Jiuduan, even though he is nearing retirement, he cannot tolerate a subordinate like Chu Xiu who dares to challenge him. Even without us, Wei Jiuduan is probably thinking about how to deal with Chu Xiu. Now that we are going to give him benefits and a reason, Wei Jiuduan will not refuse, and he has no reason to refuse. In the Guanxi torture hall branch, Wei Jiuduan, who was sitting in his study and drinking tea, had a gloomy expression. As a torture officer, he could not do anything to his own patrol inspector. This was probably the first time in all these years in the Guanzhong torture room. But it was precisely because of this that Wei Jiuduan was even more dissatisfied. He had to suppress Chu Xiu before he retired. As for forming a good relationship with him, Wei Jiuduan had never thought about it. After he retired, he was prepared to take his savings and leave the Guanzhong torture room to retire elsewhere. All these years, due to his personality, Wei Jiuduan had offended many people. Among the torture officers, Yin Batong was his archenemy. Xiao Yi and Chu Simo did not have a good relationship with him. This included his own subordinates. Other than his foster son Yangling, everyone else probably had an opinion of him. Moreover, some of Wei Jiuduan's actions had caused Guan Xiyu to be displeased. If he continued to stay in the Guanzhong torture room, he would be an idiot. Chapter 328. Wei Jiuduan was surprised by forefather Wei's sudden visit. He naturally knew the Wei clan's ancestor, and had many dealings with him when they were young. Of course, with their personalities and standpoints, these so-called dealings were naturally more confrontational and conflicting. But as forefather Wei went into seclusion, the two did not have much interaction. Wei Jiuduan knew that forefather Wei was famed for his fear of death. When his vitality started to decline, this old man did not dare to stay in the Jianghu. He hid in the back residence of the Wei family to recuperate, and wanted to extend his lifespan. When forefather Wei saw Wei Jiuduan, he smiled and cupped his hands. We have not seen each other for many years. Official Wei is still as elegant as ever. Wei Jiuduan put on a fake smile and said, the two of us can be considered old acquaintances, so don't talk so much nonsense. All these years, you haven't taken a single step out of the Wei clan. Why have you suddenly come to find me? Seeing Wei Jiuduan so direct, forefather Wei did not keep him in suspense. He said gravely, Chu Xiu, the Wei family has come for Chu Xiu. Wei Jiuduan frowned and said, what do you mean? Forefather Wei said gravely, official Wei, you should know what I mean. Chu Xiu has wild ambitions. As long as he exists, Guanxi will not have a day of peace. This time, Chu Xiu was so arrogant that he went to other prefectures to capture people. I sent Wei Chongling to demand an explanation, but he was wounded by Chu Xiu's subordinates. Lord Wei, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but Chu Xiu's influence in the Guanxi region is stronger than yours. After a period of time, I'm afraid that the entire Guanxi region will only know of Chu Xiu and not you, Lord Wei. Wei Jiuduan's expression changed, but he still snorted. So what? This old man is about to retire. Do I still care about these things like fame and fortune? The Wei clan ancestor revealed a faint smile. Master Wei, you and I have known each other for several decades. Do you think I don't know what kind of person you are? Can you just swallow your anger? Just now, you told me not to keep you in suspense. Now let's be frank. Chu Xiu capturing someone from my Wei family is a small matter, but my Wei family losing face is a big matter. So, my Wei family must get this person back, and Chu Xiu must give in. As for you, Lord Wei, I'm sure you also want to suppress Chu Xiu. This time, you and I can join forces and completely suppress Chu Xiu's arrogance. This time, Chu Xiu is in the wrong. Don't tell me that Lord Wei doesn't even have the courage to touch Chu Xiu? Hearing this, Wei Jiuduan's face immediately revealed a hint of anger. However, before Wei Jiuduan could react, the Wei clan's patriarch handed him a card. Wei Jiuduan opened it, and saw a large number of precious spirit medicines and cultivation resources. The Wei clan's patriarch said indifferently, "I knew that Lord Wei was preparing to retire, so I prepared these gifts for you in advance." Wei Juduan closed the card and thought for a while before saying, "In 3 days, come to the main hall to collect the person. I will ask Chu Xiu to hand over the person." The Wei clan's patriarch nodded and left. Just as the Wei clan's patriarch had said, Wei Juduan had long wanted to suppress Chu Xiu. Now that he had this opportunity, it was just right. Especially since the benefits that the Wei clan's patriarch had given him were something that Wei Juduan could not refuse. Wei Juduan ordered someone to call Yang Ling over. After entering, Yang Ling immediately bowed and said, "Foster father, why are you looking for me?" Seeing Yang Ling, Wei Juduan's expression became a little better. The Guanxi patrol envoys were either disloyal like Chu Xiu, or like Jiang Taoran and the others, each with their own schemes and eagerly waiting for him to leave. The one who was truly on his side and reliable was his foster son, Yang Ling, whom he had been nurturing and taking care of all this time. Thinking of this, Wei Juduan really felt that he had treated Yang Ling unfairly all these years. Looking at Yang Ling, Wei Juduan's expression softened a little. He said, "You should have heard about what Chu Xiu has done during this period of time. Now that the Wei clan has come knocking, I is also prepared to suppress this Chu Xiu. Go and tell Chu Xiu that in 3 days bring the person to the branch and hand the person over to the Wei clan." Yang Ling said hesitantly, "But foster father, with Chu Xiu's personality, will he hand the person over so easily?" Wei Juduan said indifferently, "Not handing the person over is disobeying orders. Don't forget, I am still the disciplinary officer. It is a big taboo to go against one's superiors in the Guanzhong torture room. If Chu Xiu dares to disobey orders, although I won't go too far, it won't be a problem for me to take away one of his prefectures. Even Hall Leader Guan won't be able to say anything. Hall Leader Guan is impartial and impartial. Even if he is biased towards Chu Xiu, he will still have to consider the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, right?" Yang Ling's heart trembled. According to what Wei Juduan said, regardless of whether Chu Xiu handed the person over or not, he would actually be at a disadvantage. If he handed the person over, he would definitely lose his reputation. As long as he handed the person over, the people of Guanxi would definitely think, "So what if you Chu Xiu are arrogant? In the end you still have to compromise." If he didn't hand the person over, Wei Juduan would use the crime of disobeying orders to take away one of the prefectures under Chu Xiu. This was even more unsolvable. A higher official could crush a person to death. Unless Guan Xiyu could step forward to stop it, could Chu Xiu kill Wei Juduan? However, according to Yang Ling's understanding of Guan Xiyu's personality, it seemed like she wouldn't intervene in such matters. After thinking for a moment, Yang Ling respectfully cupped his hands at Wei Juduan and said, "Yes, I will do it now." After exiting the main door, Yang Ling immediately headed to the Jianzhou prefecture. At that moment, he was already completely tied up in Chu Xiu's carriage. It was too late to leave now. Once he entered the hall, Yang Ling said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Official Chu, something bad has happened. Wei Juduan has joined forces with the Nine Plains Wei family to deal with you." With that, Yang Ling directly told him about the conspiracy and plans of Wei Juduan and the Wei family. Wei Juduan thought that he only had one loyal godson, Yang Ling, under him. If he knew that Yang Ling had sold him out in such a short time, Wei Juduan would probably go berserk from anger before Chu Xiu could do anything. After hearing this, Chu Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a hint of coldness. To be honest, Chu Xiu actually didn't want to deal with Wei Juduan so soon. Previously, Chu Xiu's plan was to make Wei Juduan a mere figurehead step by step. With Wei Juduan as the disciplinary officer above him, Chu Xiu's authority would be completely above Wei Juduan's. This way, once he reached the unity of heaven and man realm, he would naturally become the disciplinary officer. The rules of the Guanzhong torture room had always been like this. The torture officers were all promoted from their respective territories. This way, they would have a certain foundation and would be easier to manage. With Chu Xiu's current power in Guanxi, as long as he reached the unity of heaven and man realm step by step, the position of Guanxi torture officer would definitely belong to him. But now that Wei Jiuduan insisted on finding trouble with him, Chu Xiu couldn't care so much. Regardless of whether it was the first or the second of Wei Jiuduan's conditions, Chu Xiu wouldn't agree to them. Since that was the case, Chu Xiu wouldn't choose either and would choose to completely fall out with them. After calling the Ghost Hand King and the others over, Chu Xiu explained his plan to them. The Ghost Hand King and the others could accept it, but Yang Ling's eyes widened in shock. He hesitated and said, "Official Chu, is this really feasible?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Nothing in this world is 100% feasible. I can only reduce the variables to the minimum. Yang Ling, you are the most crucial part of this. If you don't participate, I won't force you. If you stand on my side, there will definitely be a place for you in the Guanxi area in the future. You know my personality. I'm not Wei Jiuduan, and I don't like to paint pavilions in the sky for others." Yang Ling smiled bitterly and said, "Whatever Lord says, this subordinate will do." Chu Xiu gave him two choices, but he didn't dare to choose the former. He had heard everything, and Chu Xiu had something on him. If he didn't want to follow Chu Xiu, then there was only one path, death. Chu Xiu didn't force him, because there was no need to force him to choose death. 3 days later, Chu Xiu brought the Ghost Hand King and the others to the Guanxi branch. Actually, ever since Chu Xiu came to the Guanxi branch, he rarely came to the branch. Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to deal with Wei Jiuduan, and he didn't want to deal with Wei Jiuduan either. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. Perhaps from today onwards, this place would be under his control. Of course, it depended on whether things went smoothly. After the surrounding warriors of the Guanxi branch saw Chu Xiu, they all greeted Chu Xiu. Their attitudes were not bad. In fact, Chu Xiu's reputation in the entire Guanzhong torture room was still very good. Although he was mostly cursed in the outside world, he was, after all, a member of the Guanzhong torture room. For so many years, the Guanzhong torture room had always been unknown. It wasn't easy for a person like Chu Xiu to become famous outside. Regardless of whether his reputation was good or bad, it was enough for the Guanzhong torture room to gain face. Even if they were all Wei Jiuduan's men, this didn't prevent them from having a good impression of Chu Xiu. From this, it could be seen how bad Wei Jiuduan's methods were. In the entire Guanxi branch, there was almost no one who truly stood on Wei Jiuduan's side. Even his adopted son, Yang Ling, had some complaints about him. Since ancient times, the way to control subordinates relied on nothing more than two things. One was a strong personal charisma, just like the previous hall master Chu Kuanga, who was respected by all the warriors in the pugilistic world. The other was benefits. If you brought benefits to your subordinates, they would risk their lives for you. The more benefits you could give to your subordinates, the more they would risk their lives for you. This was because they were afraid that one day, someone who could risk his life even more than them would come and replace their position. This was what Chu Xiu was currently using. He firmly believed that a relationship maintained by benefits was more reliable than the so-called familial and brotherly love. Just like now, Chu Xiu's subordinates, Du Guangzhong, and the group from the Blue Dragon Society. Both sides were competing with each other, afraid that they would be pulled apart by the other, and then abandoned by Chu Xiu. Chapter 329. In the main hall of the Guanxi branch, Chu Xiu entered with his men. Aside from Wei Jiuduan sitting in the middle with Yang Ling standing behind him, there was also the Wei family's ancestor and a few Wei family disciples. The Wei family's head Wei Mok wasn't here. The Wei family was such a large family, so there had to be someone guarding it. When he saw Chu Xiu walk in with his men, the Wei family's ancestor subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. He was very curious about Chu Xiu. For an old man like the Wei family's ancestor who had lived for more than 100 years, he had seen many young talents, but there weren't many who could do what Chu Xiu did. Being born in a sect and being born in the wilderness were two completely different types of treatment. The former was easy, but the latter was difficult. It was extremely difficult for Chu Xiu to reach his current position by relying on his humble background. However, the Wei family's ancestor already knew what kind of person Chu Xiu was just by looking at his face. This person's eyes were sinister, but he could still look straight at his superior, Wei Jiuduan. It could be imagined that Chu Xiu didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Wei Jiuduan. He was a person with wild ambitions. However, the Wei family's ancestor didn't mind. Rules were rules. As long as Chu Xiu wanted to stay in the Guanzhong torture room, he had to abide by these rules. How could he, Chu Xiu, dare to kill Wei Jiuduan? In the main hall, when Wei Jiuduan saw Chu Xiu arrive, he said indifferently, "You're here? Have a seat." Chu Xiu cupped his hands perfunctorily and sat down with his men. His attitude immediately made Wei Jiuduan even angrier. With a cold snort, Wei Jiuduan said, "Chu Xiu, you should know why I called you here today. I have so many inspectors under me, but you're the most courageous one. You're the Jian province's inspector. Who gave you the authority to arrest people in the Chen province?" Wei Jiuduan slammed the table and shouted angrily. His aggressive manner made it seem like he wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Is Sir Wei very angry? I arrested people from the Juyuan Wei family, not your people. Are you prepared to fall out with me for an outsider?" Before Wei Jiuduan could speak, the Wei family stood up and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, the Wei family didn't plan to be your enemy. The Guanzhong torture room and the local powers of the Guanzhong have never been opposing each other. The Guanzhong torture hall is the fish, and the Wulin factions of Guanzhong are the water. Neither side can do without the other, but you insist on taking things to the extreme, forcing the Wei family to act. The Wei family has been around for 1,000 years. Before the Guanzhong torture room was built, the Wei family was already in the Guanzhong area. You, an inspector, want to control the Wei family? You're delusional. You've crossed borders and captured a disciple of the Wei family. That's against the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Hand over the person, and we'll forget about this for now. Otherwise, Sir Wei will get justice for the Wei family." Wei Jiuduan also said coldly, "Chu Xiu, I told you to hand over the person. Did you bring him? Do you know the consequences of disobeying orders? Don't think that you can ignore the higher-ups just because you've made some contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. If I take down one of your provinces, even Hall Master Guan won't be able to say anything if he finds out." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Since Sir Wei has spoken, I'll give you face. I've already brought the person." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Wei Jiuduan and the Wei family's ancestor looked at each other, their eyes revealing a trace of smugness. Their guess was right. Compared to disobeying orders, this Chu Xiu could be considered to be sensible. Handing over the person and taking a step back would at least protect the province under his control. This way, it would be more practical. After a while, Fire Slave carried a person into the hall and closed the door at the same time. However, neither Wei Jiuduan nor the Wei family's ancestor noticed the Fire Slave's action of closing the door. Their gazes were all focused on Wei Chen. The current Wei Chen was simply miserable to the extreme. His cultivation had already been crippled, his dantian destroyed, and the tendons in his hands and feet had all been completely crushed. He hadn't used a sword to cut them, but had forcibly crushed them with his bare hands. Such a ruthless method had completely crippled Wei Chen. Moreover, it wasn't just his martial arts that were crippled, but his entire person. He would probably be bedridden for the rest of his life. Seeing Wei Chen's appearance, the Wei family's ancestor's expression was already extremely gloomy. What was the use of bringing such a cripple back to the Wei family? Would he be ridiculed by others? How was Chu Xiu making a concession? This was clearly a provocation. Wei Jiuduan was currently in a violent rage. He had asked Chu Xiu to bring Wei Chen over, but in the end, Chu Xiu had brought a cripple over. This was clearly a deliberate provocation of his dignity. Wei Jiuduan had just stood up and was about to scold Chu Xiu when Chu Xiu stood up first and said coldly, "Lord Wei, have you slammed the table enough? Slamming the table doesn't mean that the person's words are effective. You are someone who is about to retire, so why do you still want to meddle in these matters? Wouldn't it be better to obediently endure until you retire, then find a place to withdraw from the pugilistic world and retire? The Wei family has given you a lot of elixirs and pills, as expected of the Guanxi great family with 1,000 years of history. But Lord Wei, although some things are never too much, you should be prepared to spend them even if you have the life to earn them. Hearing this, the words that Wei Jiuduan had wanted to say were immediately swallowed back down. A wave of cold air instantly rushed to his head. How did Chu Xiu know that the Wei family had given him things? By guessing? But even if it was a guess, how did Chu Xiu know that the Wei family had given him elixirs and pills? Someone had leaked the secret. Only a few of Wei Jiuduan's confidants knew about this. Who was it that had informed Chu Xiu beforehand? Thinking of this, Wei Jiuduan felt that something was wrong. If someone had really leaked the secret to Chu Xiu, why would Chu Xiu still appear here? Purposely walking into a trap? But without waiting for Wei Jiuduan to think further, behind him, Yang Ling, who had always been very low-key, suddenly had an ominous glint in his eyes. All the vital energy in his body had been poured into a 9-inch long steel needle, which he stabbed towards Wei Jiuduan's back. The steel needle in Yang Ling's hand was Tang Ye's hidden weapon, the life-seizing bone needle. But originally, there was no poison on it, but Chu Xiu was afraid that it was not safe, so he had Ghost Hand King mix some highly toxic substances and smear it on the steel needle. A small steel needle could not take Wei Jiuduan's life, but Chu Xiu could. Wei Jiuduan had never thought that Yang Ling, who he had thought was the most loyal to him, would actually secretly attack him from behind. Moreover, it was a fatal attack. It was unknown what the steel needle was made of, but it was incomparably strong. It directly tore apart Wei Jiuduan's protective vital energy and stabbed towards his back. Only at this time did Wei Jiuduan really react. Under the stimulation of killing intent, his whole body exploded with a strong gang qi. With a loud bang, Yang Ling was directly hit by the gang qi and flew out while vomiting blood. And the steel needle had just barely left a bloody mark on Wei Jiuduan's arm. Although Yang Ling vomited blood because of this move, the corner of his mouth bloomed with a trace of a smile, because his mission had been completed at this time. The poison on the steel needle was not considered strong. After all, Ghost Hand King was not a poison expert like the 5 Poison sect, but this poison still had some effect on Wei Jiuduan. But at this time, Chu Xiu had already made his move. At the moment when Yang Ling made his move, Chu Xiu gathered his essence, qi and spirit. His mental energy revolved to the extreme, and the heaven's sun gazing at air technique was displayed. At this time, Chu Xiu's eyes were even slightly white, and there was not a trace of black in his eyes. He was like a ghost god, and looked extremely terrifying. Chu Xiu had been in seclusion for so many days. Although he was not able to advance the heaven's sun gazing at air technique to another realm, he had comprehended some of the uses of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. For example, at this time, he used all his mental energy on the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. At this time, the line that represented Wei Jiuduan's power was constantly dancing, but it was extremely slow, as if it was in slow motion. This was not because Wei Jiuduan's speed was slow, but because Chu Xiu's eyes were too fast. By using all his mental energy on the heaven's sun gazing at air technique, Chu Xiu even entered a subtle realm when he saw the opponent's loophole. Although he still could not predict the real change of the 3, or calculate the cause and effect of heaven's secrets, it allowed Chu Xiu to have a deeper understanding of the loophole. There was only one chance. From Yang Ling's move to Chu Xiu's move, both sides seemed to have practiced it countless times. It was simply seamless, and the timing was not different for a moment. The Heaven's Demon Dance in Chu Xiu's hand had already been unsheathed. At this time, all the spiritual energy in his body condensed on the blade, causing the originally black blade to become dark red, as if it was cast with blood. At the same time, the power of qi and blood flowed into the Heaven's Demon Dance, and the devil weapon, the Heaven's Demon Dance, seemed to feel Chu Xiu's mood. After absorbing Chu Xiu's power of qi and blood, its aura had become extremely fierce and evil. It was definitely a devil weapon among devil weapons. Staring closely at the lines that represented Wei Jiuduan, he found the weakest one. When Chu Xiu's blade fell, it was strangely silent. A bloody light flashed, and the surging devil qi had just erupted. Wei Jiuduan's face still had the disbelief of being sneak attacked by his adopted son. On the other side, the Wei family's ancestor seemed to have just reacted, and his hand had just grasped the hilt of his sword. In such a short moment, Chu Xiu's ultimate blade easily tore apart Wei Jiuduan's protective aura, and it fell from an unimaginable angle. Blood splattered, and Wei Juduan's head directly flew into the sky, and blood splattered on the ground. Chu Xiu's eyes returned to normal, and the hand that was holding the Heaven's Demon Dance trembled slightly. This blade not only consumed Chu Xiu's spiritual energy and power of qi and blood, but most importantly, it almost drained his spiritual energy. From the moment Yang Ling made his move, Chu Xiu used the Heaven's Sun gazing at air to the extreme. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to cooperate with Yang Ling so tacitly. This kind of thing could not be practiced in advance. Fortunately, Yang Ling's attack was decisive, and Chu Xiu also seized this opportunity. The two of them cooperated, and actually beheaded Wei Juduan with one blade. Although Wei Juduan was only an old man at the unity of heaven and man realm, no matter how old he was still at the unity of heaven and man realm. If Chu Xiu's matter was placed in the pugilistic world, it could almost be called a miracle. Chapter 330. As Wei Juduan's head fell to the ground, the people present were still unable to react. Before the Wei family's great ancestor could even draw his sword, Wei Juduan was already dead in front of him. This made him immediately widen his eyes, his face full of disbelief. It was true that Chu Xiu was strong, and it was also true that he also had a record of killing people in the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, Chu Xiu was in the three-flower realm before, but now Chu Xiu had already stepped into the five qis collecting in mind realm. However, what was the situation when Chu Xiu killed Feng Wuling last time? It was a fight to the death with almost all his strength, but now Chu Xiu only used a knife to cut off Wei Juduan's head. Was Chu Xiu too strong? Or was Wei Juduan, a great expert in the unity of heaven and man realm, so old that he could no longer fight? They could not see exactly what kind of power and price Chu Xiu had paid to kill Wei Juduan. Even though it had only been a short instant, the amount of power and energy Chu Xiu had expended was even more than what he had expended in the 15 minutes he had spent fighting with others. Smiling at the Wei family's great ancestor and the others, Chu Xiu shouted, "The people of the Wei family killed Lord Wei Juduan, and despised the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are punishable by death. None of them can escape." The door was opened, and the people in the Guanxi branch rushed into the lobby when they heard the sound. They were stunned when they saw Wei Juduan's body on the ground, not knowing what had happened. At this time, Yang Ling, who had been beaten by Wei Juduan to the point of vomiting blood, stood up, pointed at the Wei family's great ancestor and the others, and shouted, "Attack! They killed my adoptive father." Everyone in the Guanxi area knew that Chu Xiu and Wei Juduan did not get along, so they did not believe what Chu Xiu said. However, Yang Ling was different. Everyone in Guanxi knew that Yang Ling was Wei Juduan's godson, and Wei Juduan's confidant. The credibility of his words was much higher than that of Chu Xiu. Moreover, now that Wei Juduan was dead, they subconsciously chose to listen to Yang Ling, and attacked the Wei family together. Chu Xiu recovered his Zhen Qi, and the heavenly demon dance brought with it a sinister bloodlight and devil qi as it slashed towards the Wei family old ancestor. There was a hidden killing intent in the blade momentum. Wei clan's old ancestor's sword descended, and the icy soul-cold light slashed out, blocking Chu Xiu's blade. He roared. Chu Xiu was the one who killed him. You've all been deceived. Even though the Wei family patriarch was shouting, no one was listening to him. One was an outsider, and the other was a hero of Guanzhong torture room. A person who was the face of Guanzhong torture room. Was there a need to say more about whom they would choose to believe? The most important thing was that Yang Ling was here. Even if they did not believe in Chu Xiu, they had to believe in Yang Ling. This was also why Chu Xiu said that Yang Ling was the most important part of his plan. Stepping into the five qis collecting in the origin realm, Chu Xiu was actually confident that he could kill Wei Juduan head-on. Wei Juduan's strength was not too strong, and he was now old. According to Chu Xiu's investigation, Wei Juduan had almost never really fought in the past few years. His qi and blood were already very serious. If it was not for the fact that there were no suitable candidates in Guanzhong torture room, he was afraid that he would have already retired. Chu Xiu had now stepped into the five qis collecting in the origin realm. If they fought face to face, even if Wei Juduan did not have any loopholes, Chu Xiu could still force a loophole out of him. However, how long would it take to kill Wei Jiuduan in a head-on battle? This was something that even Chu Xiu himself could not say for sure. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse. Although Wei Jiuduan was old, no matter how old he was still in the unity of heaven and man realm. God knew what other trump cards he had. When the time came, the whole city would know about it. Even if Chu Xiu had done so many meritorious deeds for Guanzhong torture room, and even if he had a great reputation, he would not be able to get away with it. Therefore, Chu Xiu chose to let Yang Ling launch a sneak attack while he cooperated with Yang Ling. With the power of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique, he seized the opportunity that Yang Ling had created for him, and finally killed Wei Jiuduan with one slash. Just like what Yang Ling had said, this time, Chu Xiu was not 100% confident. If Yang Ling's strength was not enough and he did not injure Wei Jiuduan, if Wei Jiuduan's strength was beyond his imagination, and he did not reveal any loopholes after being sneak attacked by his own people, then Chu Xiu would not be able to kill him. However, there were no ifs in this world. Wei Jiuduan was dead, and Chu Xiu was still alive. This proved that his gamble this time was correct. Seeing that the Wei family patriarch was still shouting, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Stop shouting. No one here will believe your Wei family. So what if your Wei family has a long history? People have to look at the present and not live in history. If I say that you killed Wei Jiuduan, then you killed Wei Jiuduan." A hint of coldness and regret flashed in the Wei family patriarch's eyes. At this moment, he was really regretful. However, he did not regret making an enemy out of Chu Xiu. He regretted that he did not completely consign Chu Xiu to eternal damnation. In the Wei family patriarch's view, this Chu Xiu was simply a complete lunatic. The Wei family patriarch never would have thought that Chu Xiu actually dared to kill Wei Jiuduan in public. It was insubordination, and it was so ruthless. It was no longer important when Yang Ling was bribed by Chu Xiu. What was important was that Chu Xiu actually had the guts to kill Wei Jiuduan a long time ago. Could it be that he, Chu Xiu, was not afraid of the Guanzhong torture room's punishment? Dealing with an enemy like Chu Xiu, either he did not make a move, or he made a move to kill. Otherwise, there would be no end of trouble. The Wei family patriarch gnashed his teeth in hatred and said, "Chu Xiu, I underestimated you this time. You're simply a lunatic. I only miscalculated one thing, and that was that I did not expect my Wei family to be going against a lunatic. However, you won't be able to be arrogant for long. Killing a colleague is a serious crime, and insubordination is an even more serious crime. No matter how great your reputation in the Guanzhong torture room is, this reputation will not be able to protect you. I want to see if you, Chu Xiu, can survive this time." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Whether I can survive this time, I'm afraid you won't be able to see it." As his voice fell, Chu Xiu's hand formed a fist seal. When the seal fell, Gang Qi seemed to transform into a large net, covering all directions. Heaven and earth were useless. Under the wisdom fist seal, the Wei family patriarch's body was imprisoned. He wanted to break free, but he was shocked to find that the strength of Chu Xiu's vital qi was not inferior to his at all. The unity of heaven and man realm was a level stronger than the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Furthermore, he had been in this realm for so many years, while Chu Xiu had just stepped into the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Where did his vital qi cultivation come from? The demonic dance slashed down, and the power of the Avicii demonic blade was displayed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The surging demonic qi and vital qi merged, and the power that erupted made the Wei family patriarch fearful, and he could only bitterly resist. Right now, Chu Xiu had the intention to kill the Wei family patriarch. It should be said that from the moment he prepared to kill Wei Jiuduan, the Wei family had to be destroyed. If the Wei family was not destroyed, where could he find a scapegoat? Where could he find an excuse? In the past, when he faced Feng Wuling, Chu Xiu felt a great deal of pressure. He could only use the heaven's sun gazing at air as a gambling method to fight with his life on the line. In the end, he won the gamble, and Feng Wuling died. But now, when he faced the Wei family patriarch, Chu Xiu did not feel any pressure. There were 3 reasons. The first was that Chu Xiu had stepped into the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm, and his body was no longer the same as before. The The second was his background. It was very difficult for a rogue cultivator to reach a high position. This difficulty was not only reflected in the lack of cultivation resources and the guidance of a famous teacher, but also in the cultivation technique. Those who could rely on an ordinary cultivation technique to achieve success were in the minority. Obviously, the Wei family patriarch was not one of them. Compared to Feng Wuling's Yu maiden swordplay, his cultivation technique was on a different level. As for the third reason, it was because the Wei family patriarch's state of mind was different. He was a person who was afraid of death. Even if he was invincible in the world, he could not escape the pressure of time. Everyone in the pugilistic world would die one day, and the decline of one's qi and blood was inevitable. Those who could see through this naturally did not matter. In some large sects, those seemingly old people were actually the most terrifying. This was because they knew that they were not far from death, so they dared to use the last of their strength to fight for their sect. The power of extreme sublimation was very terrifying. However, those who could not see through this were afraid of death and always held back when they attacked. They did not dare to fight with their lives on the line, and such people were more likely to die. The Wei family patriarch was such a person. Back when he was at his peak, he only felt that his qi and blood were declining a little, so he began to cultivate in seclusion, hoping to slow down his aging. One could imagine how afraid he was of death. At this time, Chu Xiu had already made up his mind to kill, but the Wei family patriarch still did not fight with his life on the line. He only wanted to expose the fact that Chu Xiu had killed Wei Jiuduan, so that the Guanzhong torture room could punish Chu Xiu. With this kind of state of mind, the Wei family patriarch was forced to the extreme by Chu Xiu's Avicii demon blade. As a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm, he was actually suppressed by Chu Xiu to the point where even counterattacking was a luxury. During the battle, the Avicii demon blade in Chu Xiu's hand was evil and ruthless. At the same time, he would occasionally use the heaven sun gazing at air to see if he could find any loopholes in the Wei family patriarch's defense. However, he had used up too much of his energy just now, so he could not use the heaven sun gazing at air for a long time. However, it did not matter. Although the Wei family patriarch did not have any big loopholes when he attacked, it was impossible for him to make every move perfect. Once Chu Xiu found a small loophole, Chu Xiu would definitely attack wildly, almost injuring the Wei family patriarch. At this time, the other people of the Wei family were also very miserable. This time, the Wei family patriarch thought that the matter was in the bag, so he did not bring too many people. There were only a few disciples of the Wei family, most of whom were in the physical invulnerability or inner invulnerability realm. There were only 2 warriors at the 3-flower realm. However, on Chu Xiu's side, Tangye and Bugue, and the others were all here. In addition, the warriors from the Guanxi branch under Wei Jiuduan were also here. Under the combined attack of these people, several people from the Wei family had already been killed. The people under Wei Jiuduan did not kill. The ones who killed were Chu Xiu's people. Seeing this scene, the Wei family patriarch began to panic. It seemed that Chu Xiu really did not intend to let him leave alive today. Chapter 331. Not shedding a tear until you see the coffin. This phrase perfectly described the mentality of some people, such as the Wei family's ancestor. Just now, if the Wei family's ancestor had intended to escape from the beginning, Chu Xiu would not have been able to catch up with a warrior of the unity of heaven and man realm. But now that both sides had fought for so long, the Wei family's people were almost all dead, and the Wei family's ancestor himself had consumed a lot of true qi. It was already too late for him to think of escaping now. The Wei family's ancestor swung the sword in his hand, and in an instant, a wave of icy blue gang qi rippled out, drawing the heaven and earth, causing an extremely cold force to seep into the gang qi ripple and rush towards Chu Xiu. The cold air lingered around his body, and the Wei family's ancestor also wanted to take this opportunity to escape. Other than Chu Xiu, no one dared to fight head-on against an expert of the unity of heaven and man realm. Even Tangye and Yanbu Gui. Facing the Wei family's ancestor, they had no choice but to make way. If they tried to forcefully resist, it would only be courting death. But at this moment, Chu Xiu formed a seal with both hands, and in an instant, a supreme light bloomed. The perfect Aquarius seal, fulfilling a lifetime's wish. There was a loud explosion, and the cold Gang Chi was extinguished. Chu Xiu's hand formed the inner binding seal, and his figure appeared in front of the Wei family's ancestor almost in an instant. A knife slashed down, and there was a trace of strange divinity in the Avicii demon blade, making it even more evil. In his shock, the Wei clan ancestor slashed out with his sword. The sword's edge drew in the heaven and earth, and stellar energy surged towards Chu Xiu's saber like an ice storm. However, it was directly shattered by the violent demonic saber. Even the Wei family's 5th Revolution treasure weapon in the Wei family's ancestor's hand showed traces of cracks, and finally with a loud bang, it directly shattered. Chu Xiu's eyes were filled with murderous intent, forgetting the world of mortals, having no worries and a state of selflessness. The Wei ancestor hadn't fought for more than a decade, and the sword in his hand hadn't been stained with blood for more than a decade. It didn't have the baleful aura of a weapon, and he himself didn't have any killing intent or battle intent. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, had slaughtered countless people along the way. He had experienced countless life and death battles. In that instant, his killing intent surged to the heavens, causing the Wei family ancestor's heart to tremble. This was the first time he had felt fear towards Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu were to use the heaven's sun gazing at air now, he would probably be able to see many flaws in the Wei family's patriarch. However, now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the selfless killing realm, his mind was filled with killing intent and battle intent. In his current state, he was unable to display a martial art like the heaven's sun gazing at air. However, it didn't matter now. Against the Wei family's ancestor, he could clearly kill him head-on. Why would he need to find a loophole to launch a sneak attack? As the fist fell, boundless killing intent surged. The powerful killing intent seemed to condense into a solid substance, dyeing everything around it crimson red as it charged towards the Wei family's patriarch. The annihilation fist of heaven and earth. In the great yin and yang sorrowful poem of Heaven and Earth, very few people in the Jianghu could recognize most of the martial arts. For example, Chu Xiu's great primordial chaos technique of Heaven and Earth. As long as Chu Xiu didn't say anything about it, no one would be able to recognize it. However, the annihilation fist of Heaven and Earth was very famous. There were many experts in the Eastern Qi military who knew this fist technique. It condensed killing intent to the limit, and even before the fist fell, the killing intent could already tear people apart. The Wei family's patriarch also recognized the annihilation fist of Heaven and Earth. At that critical moment, all the stellar energy in his body gathered in his right arm. He pointed out with his sword finger, and the surrounding stellar energy condensed into ice. However, he continued to point out with his second finger. The power of the ice stacked together, but it didn't explode. Instead, it was hidden within, and its power multiplied. In an instant, the Wei family's patriarch pointed out 9 sword fingers in a row. The power of the 9 sword fingers overlapped, like an iceberg. In that instant, the Wei family's patriarch's face was frighteningly pale. This was the Wei family's 9-layered cold mountain sword. It could be said to be the Wei family's trump card. In fact, when the Wei family's patriarch was young, he had used this sword technique to make a name for himself. When he was at his peak, he could indeed explode with the absolute power of the 9-layered cold mountain sword. However, after using this technique, the Wei family's patriarch felt that he had exhausted himself to the limit. The killing intent of the annihilation fist came crashing down. The powerful power could suppress everything. The 9 layers of power of the 9-layered cold mountain sword exploded with a loud bang. The powerful stellar energy rushed through Chu Xiu's internal organs and meridians, causing Chu Xiu's face to turn pale in an instant. However, it was soon followed by a hint of red. However, even so, Chu Xiu still didn't retreat. Under the state of the annihilation fist, even if Chu Xiu maintained his rationality, it was inevitable that he would be affected by this powerful killing intent. He swore not to rest until he killed his opponent. He didn't even use the internal lion seal to suppress himself. Chu Xiu directly used the power of the annihilation fist to meet the 9-layered cold mountain sword head-on. With a loud bang, the ice completely shattered. However, Chu Xiu's right arm had already been cut by the ice and was dripping with blood. However, these were only external injuries. Chu Xiu didn't even care. The fist landed, and the perfect Aquarius seal burst out. The blinding light shone down, and within the dazzling light, there was a ferocious killing intent. The Wei family patriarch did his best to resist, but he was still blasted by the seal until his blood boiled, and his figure fell back. Chu Xiu turned around and formed the great Vajra seal. The powerful fist landed with a loud bang. They collided again, and there was a loud explosion. Right now, Chu Xiu's state could be said to be strange. He was like a robot, smashing down one after another with the great Vajra seal. He was completely competing with the Wei family patriarch in stamina, primeval qi, and willpower. Although Chu Xiu was a realm lower than the Wei family patriarch, he had the glazed golden thread gu, and his cultivation methods that were not inferior to the top sections. His accumulation was not inferior to the Wei family patriarch. After more than 10 moves, the Wei family patriarch was already vomiting blood from the impact. He couldn't hold on any longer. In such an intense battle, no one could retreat. It was either kill the opponent or be killed themselves. Wei family patriarch felt fear in his heart. He wanted to retreat, but retreating meant death. Just as the Wei family patriarch's attacks were gradually slowing down, and he had the intention to retreat, Chu Xiu formed seals with both hands. It was an incomparably complex seal. In an instant, the 5-colored light in Chu Xiu's hands shone brightly, and the power of the 5 elements burst out. They connected head to tail, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other, and smashed down like a great sunwheel seal. Sunwheel seal. Chu Xiu had used the seal technique before, but he had barely managed to do it. He hadn't unleashed its full might. The true power of the sunwheel seal should be at the 5 qi unification stage. The power of the 5 elements in the body had reached a balance, and the 5 elements had fused into one. Only then could the true power of the sunwheel seal be unleashed. The power of the 5 elements burst out, the 5 powers mutually reinforced and restrained each other, and the superimposed power was not as simple as adding them together. Under the sunwheel seal, the meridians in the Wei family patriarch's body shattered, and he vomited blood as he was sent flying. But immediately after, a black light appeared beside him. Heavenly demonic dance slashed across the Wei family patriarch's neck, causing blood to splatter. The Wei family patriarch's head was already in Chu Xiu's hands. The surrounding Guanxi branch martial artists were all stunned, including Chu Xiu's subordinates. Although they knew that Chu Xiu had killed a one-with-the-world expert, that was only hearsay. Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, the shock they felt was incomparable to hearsay. Holding the Wei family patriarch's head, Chu Xiu popped a healing pill into his mouth, recovering his injuries and restoring his true qi. To be honest, Chu Xiu did not feel the slightest pressure in the battle with the Wei family patriarch. The feeling the opponent gave Chu Xiu was not even as strong as the leader of the River East's 5 heroes, Chung Buji. The reason for this was very simple. The Wei family patriarch was afraid of death. Even though Chu Xiu had killed the Wei family patriarch in the end, until the last moment of his life, the Wei family patriarch did not choose to burn his blood essence to fight to the death. After all, for a martial artist of his age, his qi and blood had already faded. Burning his blood essence was equivalent to burning his lifespan. It was a pity that even if he did not fight to the death, Chu Xiu would fight to the death. The Wei family patriarch fantasized that he could escape unscathed and watch Chu Xiu suffer. In the end, the blood essence that he did not burn was scattered all over the ground. Looking at the people around him, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "The Wei family killed Lord Wei Jioduan and looked down on the Guanzhong torture room's rules. They are traitors. Now that the Wei family patriarch has been executed, the rest of you, follow me to the Wei family and wipe them out completely." Yang Ling followed behind Chu Xiu and shouted, "Follow official Chu and kill the Wei family." In terms of strength and status, Yang Ling was naturally inferior to Chu Xiu. However, his identity as Wei Jioduan's adopted son was very useful at this time. With Wei Jioduan's death, he was naturally seen as Wei Jioduan's successor by the other martial artists. At least in the eyes of these martial artists from the Guanxi branch, Yang Ling's words were more effective than Chu Xiu's. The crowd surged out of the courtyard. Chu Xiu called Du Guangzhong and the others over and transmitted his voice in a low voice. You guys don't have to go to destroy the Wei family. Du Guangzhong immediately panicked. Destroying the Wei family was a great merit. What did official Chu mean by this? He did not want them to achieve any merit. Was he prepared to abandon them? Seeing Du Guangzhong's hesitant expression, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Don't think too much. I have other things for you to do. You have seen Wei Jiuduan's corpse. Bring Qin Fang, Lu Chengli, and the others to deal with it. You are all professionals. You should be able to deal with it to the extent that others can't see through it. If you really can't, then destroy the corpse. It doesn't matter." Chu Xiu had framed the Wei family for killing Wei Jiuduan. If this matter was spread to the outside world, no one would believe it. Chu Xiu did not expect them to believe it either. It would be fine as long as a small number of people chose to believe it. Now, Chu Xiu was dealing with Wei Jiuduan's corpse not to deceive others, but to have a reasonable explanation. At the very least he could save face. Chapter 332. In the Nine Plains Wei family, the family head Wei Mok felt a little uneasy. However, he believed that there shouldn't be any changes to the situation. Wei Jiuduan definitely wanted to suppress Chu Xiu. With his status as the disciplinary officer, Wei Mok couldn't think of any way for Chu Xiu to break out of this predicament. Moreover, it would be useless even if they tried to use force. They were two experts at the oneness of heaven and man realm. Who in the Guanxi region could defeat them? However, at this moment, an intense battle cry came from outside the Wei family's manor. Wei Mok stood up abruptly, pushed the door open and shouted, "What's going on? Who dares to behave atrociously in my Wei family?" At this time, a Wei family disciple ran over with a panicked expression and shouted, "Family head! Not good. Chu Xiu brought his men to attack our Wei clan, and even said that the old ancestor killed Wei Jiuduan, and has been executed. Our Wei clan despises the laws of the Guanzhong torture room, and wants to destroy our Wei clan." Wei Mok's figure swayed as he shouted, "Impossible." He knew what the Wei clan's ancestor had gone to do. Why would the ancestor kill Wei Jiuduan for no reason? This was definitely a conspiracy. That Wei family disciple said miserably, "Family head, I know it's impossible, but Chu Xiu has already fought his way in. They didn't even give us a chance to explain ourselves." Wei Mok hurriedly ran to the front yard. The people of the Wei clan had already been forced to retreat step by step under the blades of the Guanzhong torture room martial artists. There was basically no room for them to retaliate. If all the Wulin forces in the entire Guanxi area united, they would indeed be more powerful than the Guanxi branch. However, if they were to face a force alone, the power of the Guanzhong torture room would be overwhelming. Wei Mok's eyes turned red when he saw this scene. The Wei family had never lost so many people in the Jianghu for so many years. These were the future hopes of the Wei family. Wei Mok shouted, "Stop. Chu Xiu, what do you mean by this? You said that my Wei family's ancestor killed Wei Jiuduan, but where is the evidence? No matter what, the Wei family is a big family in Guanxi, yet you want to destroy us just like that? Where are the laws and regulations of the Guanzhong torture room? What about the rules? Also, you're just an inspector of the Jian province. What right do you have to bring people to attack my Wei family?" What Chu Xiu was doing now was actually unreasonable according to the rules, but it didn't matter. Chu Xiu was here to kill people, so why would he care about whether it was reasonable or not? Therefore, in the face of Wei Mok's question, Chu Xiu only sneered coldly. Without saying a word, he charged forward with his saber. In the past, when Chu Xiu was at the Three Flower Realm, he had fought with Wei Mok. Wei Mok's strength was considered mediocre even among the Five Qis Origin Realm martial artists. After all, the Wei family had been in a corner of Guanxi for a long time. Although Wei Mok was the family master, he basically didn't fight. Even if he did, it wasn't a battle of life and death. In addition, the Wei family's inherited martial arts were weak, which led to the opponent's combat strength being very low. At least, it was much lower than the 5 heroes of Jiangdong. Not to mention Qingbuji, Wei Mok couldn't even compare to Elvi Tong and Dong Xiangyi. After all, these people were often in the Jianghu and had almost never stopped fighting. At this moment, when Chu Xiu slashed with his saber, the Avicii demonic chi was fused with the blood-refined divine aura. In addition, Chu Xiu had directly stepped into the selfless killing realm. His killing intent was also condensed in this saber. This could be said to be extremely evil, and it directly caused Wei Mok's expression to change drastically. The ice sword on the longsword in his hand was condensed to the extreme. He even directly burned his chi and blood and spat out a mouthful of blood, causing the ice blue sword to be mixed with a trace of blood red. Wei Mok's attack was much more decisive than the Wei family's old ancestor. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately burned his chi and blood. Unfortunately, he didn't have the Wei family's old ancestor's strength. In front of Chu Xiu, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. As the saber fell, Wei Mok's sword shattered, and the long sword in his hand also shattered. Wei Mok's entire body was slashed by this saber, and he vomited blood and was sent flying. Chu Xiu's hand formed the inner binding seal, and his figure was like a black light. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Wei Mok. The surging demonic chi that contained the evil divinity slashed down, and this time, Wei Mok's entire body was directly cut into two. With Wei Mok's current strength, he didn't even have the qualifications to withstand Chu Xiu's complete 3 blades of Avicii. Wei Mok's corpse fell, and the blood mist in the air didn't dissipate. This caused the Wei family members to be stunned for a moment, and then they immediately dispersed. Previously, the Wei family members didn't disperse, and they still had the courage to resist, because they had a patriarch like Wei Mok. But now, they saw their patriarch being killed by Chu Xiu in 2 slashes. This could be said to be extremely powerful, and they instantly collapsed and started to flee. There was no need for Chu Xiu to go personally. The others could do it. Chu Xiu said to Ghost Hand Monarch, "Search the Wei family. These years, the Wei family has violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room many times. These are all evidence. Gather the other financial and cultivation resources, and distribute them after the matter is over." Ghost Hand Monarch nodded with a smile. He was very good at this kind of thing. "Right, Lord, what should we do with Wei Changling?" Ghost Hand Monarch suddenly remembered this person. Although he was a member of the Wei family, he was also the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "The Wei family is rebelling. As a member of the Wei family, how can Wei Changling be anything good? He is a spy who infiltrated the Guanzhong torture room. Of course he has to be killed." Ghost Hand Monarch nodded. At this time, Tangya heard this and suddenly said, "Lord, you don't have to do anything about this. Leave it to me and Yin Bugui. Last time, we let this old man escape. This time, he won't be able to escape." Chu Xiu nodded, and suddenly asked, "Have you touched the threshold of the 3-flower realm?" Tangya nodded and said, "Last time when I fought with Wei Changling, I sensed it. After all, I have been an assassin for so many years. Just relying on seclusion to gain enlightenment is not as fast as fighting to the death." These two people's performance in the Heavenly Sin division had been outstanding. If there were no accidents, they could even rise to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters in the future. It was not strange that they had entered the 3-flower realm now. After the Wei family was defeated, they were basically at the mercy of Chu Xiu and the others. However, the Wei family had so many martial artists, and Chu Xiu could not kill them all. Some martial artists who had escaped from the Wei family remembered that the Wei family still had Wei Changling, so they went to the Spirit State Prefecture to inform Wei Changling. At this time, Wei Changling was still recovering in the hall. Last time, he had suffered greatly at the hands of Tangya and Yen Bugui, and his injuries had not yet healed. When he received the news of the Wei family's destruction, Wei Changling's first reaction was disbelief, and his second reaction was terror. The Wei family was destroyed, and his greatest support was destroyed. Wei Jiuduan, who could suppress Chu Xiu in Guanxi, was also dead. Wouldn't Chu Xiu be able to crush him as easily as crushing an ant? As for whether Chu Xiu would be punished by the Guanzhong torture room in the future, Wei Changling did not even dare to think about it. In his view, Chu Xiu had already gone crazy. He dared to kill anyone, and wanted to kill anyone. His forefather and Wei Jiuduan were both dead. Was he still missing? So when he received the news, Wei Chongling immediately prepared to flee. But when he stepped out of the hall, he was met by Tang Ye, Yin Bugui, and a group of martial artists under Chu Xiu's command. Before Wei Chongling could speak, Tang Ye said with a smile, "Official Wei, we have come to send you on your way." As he finished, Tang Ye and Yin Bugui attacked together. As for the others, they were only responsible for watching Wei Chongling's subordinates. In reality, even if no one was watching, Wei Chongling's subordinates would not dare to attack. How many days had it been since Wei Chongling became the inspector? These people were the subordinates of the previous inspector, Kai Jingsheng. They had no loyalty to Wei Chongling. Also, as Chu Xiu attacked, all of Guanxi was in an uproar. Ordinary Jianghu constables like them did not dare to participate. Tang Ye and Yin Bugui did not take long to kill Wei Chongling. Last time, the two of them had worked together to seriously injure Wei Chongling. This time, Wei Chongling had not recovered from his injuries, and he was afraid. His combat power was not as good as last time. So in less than 15 minutes, Wei Chongling was killed in the fight between Tang Ye and Yin Bugui. As Wei Chongling died, the Nine Plains Wei family became a part of Guanxi's history. Even if some of the branch family members escaped in 2s and 3s, they probably did not dare to stay in Guanzhong. The events in Guanxi swept through all of Guanzhong like a storm. The news that Chu Xiu released to the outside world was that the Wei family had broken the law, doing all sorts of things that went against the laws of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Thus, he had been called over by Wei Jiuduan for questioning. In the end, the old ancestor of the Wei family had launched a sneak attack on Wei Jiuduan in anger, causing Wei Jiuduan's death. As for Chu Xiu, in order to avenge his superior, he had risked his life to kill the old ancestor of the Wei family, destroying the Wei family. Chu Xiu had released this news to the outside, and he had sent the same news to the headquarters. But anyone in their right mind would not believe Chu Xiu's words. The Wei family had done these things for a long time. Had Wei Jiuduan lost his mind? He was close to retirement before coming to investigate the Wei family. This clearly did not make sense. Also, the Wei family could not have killed Wei Jiuduan. Who was Wei Jiuduan? He was not a minor character, but the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room. While he was old and about to retire, he was still one of the upper echelons of the Guanzhong torture room. The Nine Plains Wei family was a large family in Guanzhong. They were famous in all of Guanzhong, much less in Guanzhong. But Guanzhong was the Guanzhong of the Guanzhong torture room. The Wei family dared to kill the Guanxi torture officer in a branch of the Guanzhong torture room? Even if the forefather of the Wei family drank a jar of fake wine, he would not do something like this. Chapter 333. The excuse that Chu Xiu had spread was very clumsy, so clumsy that people did not need to analyze it to guess that this was a fantasy story. People even suspected that it was Chu Xiu who had killed Wei Jiuduan. This time, people had spread rumors that Wei Jiuduan had allied with the Wei family to suppress Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had a reason to act. However, the only thing people were puzzled about was how Chu Xiu had managed to kill two Unity of Heaven experts. His strength should not be abnormal to such a degree, right? In any case, this matter had caused an uproar. Everyone in Guanzhong wanted to see how the main hall would handle the matter of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu appeared very calm at this time. He was still waiting in the provincial government, as though he had not killed them. 3 days later, Yuqi rushed over from the main hall, traveling day and night. Seeing Chu Xiu's limited appearance, Yuqi couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Brother Chu, you've caused such a huge commotion, yet you can still sit still?" Chu Xiu had someone pour a cup of tea for Yuqi. He said coolly, "I have a clear conscience. Why can't I sit still?" Yuqi took a step closer and said gravely, "Brother Chu, you really did not kill Wei Jiuduan?" Chu Xiu said with a serious expression, "Brother Yuqi, you also suspect me? While I have conflicts with Wei Jiuduan, he is still my superior. How can I, Chu Xiu, do such a disgraceful thing?" Yuqi looked suspiciously at Chu Xiu. In any case, he did not believe Chu Xiu's words. However, he had not thought that Chu Xiu would tell him the truth. Yuqi said gravely, "Brother Chu, you know how much trouble you have caused this time. Right now, the hall master has sent me to inform you to go to the main hall for questioning." The main hall will send people to investigate Wei Jiuduan's death and the Wei family's matter. Come with me now. Of course, don't think about escaping. After Wei Jiuduan's death, the experts of the criminal division immediately sealed off the roads to Guangzhou. You cannot escape. Chu Xiu smiled freely and said, I, Chu Xiu, have a clear conscience. Why should I escape? Yuqi looked deeply at Chu Xiu and said, I hope so. Since Brother Chu has a clear conscience, then come with me to the Guangzhou Disciplinary Hall to be interrogated. We have to leave now. I hope Brother Chu will not make things difficult for me. Yuqi's attitude toward Chu Xiu did not change much because he was not sure if Chu Xiu could make it through this time. If it was someone else who had killed their superior, they would certainly be heavily punished. The lightest punishment would be having their martial arts crippled and being imprisoned in the Black Dungeon for the rest of their lives. But if this person was Chu Xiu, then things would be different. With Chu Xiu's strength and talent, he had already become the face of the Guangzhou torture room. In the end, the Guangzhou torture room wanted to punish him. One reason was that it was a pity, and the other was that it felt like slapping his own face. So until the end, no one knew what Chu Xiu's fate would be. Chu Xiu said lightly, Don't worry. Since I have a clear conscience, I will not make things difficult for Brother Yuqi. Yuqi shrugged his shoulders. Whether Chu Xiu really had a clear conscience, only Chu Xiu himself knew. Anyway, his task was only to bring Chu Xiu to the main hall. He didn't care about anything else. However, according to Yuqi's understanding of Chu Xiu, although this person was a little crazy in some things, he was definitely not an idiot. Chu Xiu would not do something like putting himself in danger. Looking at Chu Xiu's calm appearance, could it be that he was already confident? The news that Chu Xiu followed Yuqi to the headquarters spread quickly. Of course, this was also the reason why Chu Xiu did not ask the Ghost Hand King and the others to cover up the news. As soon as this news came out, there was a sudden burst of discussion in the Guanxi area. Of course, there were also some people who secretly carried out all kinds of small tricks. Among the patrol envoys of the Guanxi region, Yang Ling was already Chu Xiu's man. Furthermore, he was a witness of this incident and was also Wei Jiuduan's adopted son. Yang Ling had long been summoned to the headquarters alone. Feng Hua and Situ Xing did not think much of it after hearing the news. They were not young anymore, and their ambitions were not that big. Although they were also afraid of the fact that Wei Jiuduan had died in the hands of Chu Xiu, they did not dare to have any other thoughts. As for the remaining one, Jiang Taoran, he was secretly making some small moves. Jiang Taoran only had the strength of the Three-Flower Realm. Even if Wei Jiuduan died, Chu Xiu could not return to Guanxi, and he could not be the penal officer. However, Jiang Taoran really did not want Chu Xiu to return to Guanxi. The reason was very simple. He could not accept Chu Xiu's strength. Although Jiang Taoran was low-key and slippery, he was actually a scheming person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to snatch a prefecture from the hands of Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan during their fierce battle, and then reap the benefits. Previously, Chu Xiu's move to control the business lifeline of the entire Guanxi area had already made him very dissatisfied. Although Chu Xiu didn't let them suffer a loss and still gave them a large portion of the profits, Jiang Taoran was still dissatisfied. He was a patrol inspector, but in the end he was like a puppet. He had no prestige at all. How could that be? He was not old guys like Situ Xing and Feng Hua, who had no ambition. As long as there were benefits, everything was negotiable. Therefore, Jiang Taoran secretly spread the news that Chu Xiu had killed Wei Jiuduan, and that this time, he would be severely punished by the Guangzhou torture room. He tried to stir up the momentum in Guanxi and add fuel to the fire, so that Chu Xiu would not be able to return. However, Jiang Taoran was cautious by nature, and he was very careful. He only added fuel to the fire in the dark, and he did not dare to show himself. Compared to Jiang Taoran, there were people who did things more directly, such as the Zhang family of Yuan Continent. The Zhang family of Yuan Continent was the only big family in Guanxi that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Wei family of Jiyuan. The Zhang family's great ancestor, Zhang Wanshan, also had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm, but he was older than the Wei family's great ancestor. Zhang Wanshan was already more than 180 years old this year. Although warriors in the unity of heaven and man realm could theoretically live up to 200 years, this was only in theory. Warriors often had to face all kinds of killings in the pugilistic world. It was extremely cruel, and it was common for them to be seriously injured. When they fought with their lives on the line, they would even have to burn their blood essence. Although this kind of injury could be recovered in the later stages, it would still leave behind some hidden dangers. When a warrior's chi and blood declined, it would gradually erupt. Therefore, there were actually not many warriors who could live up to 200 years old at the unity of heaven and man realm. It was already not easy for the Zhang family's great ancestor to live to this age. At this time, the Zhang family's Zhang Kunz was reporting to Zhang Wanshan about Chu Xiu with a serious expression. Zhang Wanshan was wearing a golden brocade robe. His hair and beard were all white, but his face was still rosy. Although he was old, he was still a distance away from the end of his lifespan. After listening to Zhang Kunz's narration, after a while, Zhang Wanshan asked in a deep voice, "What do you think of this matter?" Zhang Kunz hesitated for a moment before saying, "It should be a good thing. The Wei family has been fighting with our Zhang family for so many years. Now that the Wei family has finally been destroyed, Chu Xiu was summoned to the headquarters this time. I reckon he's in trouble. Our Zhang family should be rising." Zhang Wanshan shook his head when he heard that. Without the lips, the teeth will feel the cold. You only saw the Wei family fighting with our Zhang family for so many years, but you didn't see the mutual support between our Zhang family and the Wei family all these years. Guanzhong torture room is Guanzhong torture room, and our pugilistic world forces are pugilistic world forces. No matter how we fight with the Wei family, we are on the same side. As long as Guanzhong torture room goes overboard, our two families can put down all the grudges and join hands at any time. Now that the Wei family has been destroyed, it's equivalent to losing half of the people to bear the pressure for our Zhang family. If anything happens in the future, our Zhang family will have to bear it alone. Zhang Kunz broke out in a cold sweat. After all, he was still young and could not see as far as Zhang Wanshan. "Then, great ancestor, what should we do now?" Zhang Wanshan said in a deep voice. "We can't let Chu Xiu return to Guanxi. You know Chu Xiu's character. He's ambitious and domineering. This time, we don't know what methods he used, but Wei Jiuduan and Wei Hanshan actually died in his hands. Our Zhang family has had conflicts with Chu Xiu before. If we let him return to Guanxi, what will happen to our Zhang family? We will probably become the second Wei family." Zhang Kunz hesitated. "But how can our Zhang family influence the headquarters? My Zhang family doesn't have anyone in the headquarters." Zhang Wanshan said in a deep voice, "We don't have anyone there, and we don't need them to do anything. Go and gather all the forces that have a good relationship with our Zhang family. Let's write a joint petition and request Guanzhong torture room to punish Chu Xiu. What the Guanzhong disciplinary hall wants is stability. Right now, Chu Xiu's existence has already caused the Guanxi region to be unstable. As long as we create a large enough commotion, even the Guanzhong disciplinary hall will not be able to ignore it." Zhang Kunz nodded repeatedly after hearing this. The great ancestor was indeed the great ancestor. He was indeed farsighted. In the martial world, there were some things that could be solved even if one didn't rely on fighting and killing. Just like now, the Zhang family only needed to move their lips, and they could increase the pressure on Chu Xiu in the main hall. At this time, Chu Xiu still did not know about the changes in Guanxi. After arriving at Guanzhong City, Chu Yuanqing personally came to pick up Chu Xiu. Seeing Chu Xiu, Chu Yuanqing sighed and said, "Brother Chu, how did things become like this? Did you really kill Wei Jiuduan?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Big brother, don't you believe me? I, Chu Xiu, have always been a person who doesn't offend others if they don't offend me. I was forced to do this." Chu Xiu did not say that he killed Wei Jiuduan, but he also did not say that he did not kill Wei Jiuduan. However, psychologically, Chu Yuanqing was on Chu Xiu's side. His life was saved by Chu Xiu, and although Chu Xiu had always been extremely ruthless, it seemed that Chu Xiu had never taken the initiative to attack him. So subconsciously, Chu Yuanqing was still on Chu Xiu's side. Chapter 334. Chu Yuanqing rarely interfered with the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, but this time, Chu Yuanqing really didn't want anything to happen to Chu Xiao. Looking at Yuqi, Chu Yuanqing said in a low voice, "Brother Chu has done so much for the Guanzhong torture room. And now you're going to punish him because of a groundless matter?" Yuqi smiled bitterly and said, "Hero Chu, you've misunderstood. The hall master and the other lords don't want Brother Chu to be wrongly accused, so they called him to the main hall for questioning. If Brother Chu is innocent, then they will naturally refute the rumors. Moreover, the hall master only invited Brother Chu here, not arrested him. Otherwise, the people going would not be me, but those guys from the criminal division. Don't worry, Hero Chu. Tomorrow, the hall master and the others will gather at the main hall to discuss this matter. Brother Chu is the face of the Guanzhong torture room, so the hall master and the others will definitely handle this matter carefully." Chu Yuanqing nodded and said, "That's good. Since it's like this, Brother Chu can stay at my place today. Is there any problem?" Yuqi nodded and said, "Of course, Brother Chu is not a prisoner. Naturally, you can stay wherever you want." Chu Xiao didn't escape halfway. Now that they were in Guanzhong City, Yuqi naturally didn't worry that Chu Xiao would escape. After Chu Yuanqing brought Chu Xiao to his house, he immediately said to him, "Brother Chu, don't worry. I'll go talk to Brother Guan and guarantee that you'll be fine this time." Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, "Brother Chu, you don't have to do this. Your identity is special. If you talk to Hall Master Guan about these things, I'm afraid it won't be good. It'll be easy for others to gossip." Chu Yuanqing snorted and said, "Let whoever wants to say it. Do you think I'm afraid of them?" As Chu Kuanga's only son, this legacy could last for a long time. As long as Guan Siyu was still alive, this legacy could also last for a day. Chu Xiao cupped his hands and said, "Thank you very much, Brother Chu. However, there is one more thing I need to trouble Brother Chu with. I need to trouble Brother Chu to give something to someone." As he spoke, Chu Xiao took out a box and handed it to Chu Yuanqing. Chu Yuanqing asked in surprise, "To whom?" Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "Give it to Mrs. Guan." Hearing that Chu Xiao wanted to give the item to Mei Qinglian, Chu Yuanqing couldn't help but frown. "Why are you giving it to her?" Chu Xiao smiled and said, "It's just a small gift for Mrs. Guan. It's used to please a woman. You have to know that sometimes, a woman's pillow talk is more effective than any words." Chu Yuanqing curled his lips and said, "Brother Guan isn't the kind of person who is obsessed with women. I guess it's a waste of time for you to give it." Chu Xiao smiled and didn't speak. He didn't know whether Guan Siyu was obsessed with women or not, but Chu Xiao only knew that Mei Qinglian was not a simple woman. In fact, it was really meaningless for Chu Yuanqing to go this time. Whether it was Guan Siyu or the other people in the Guanzhong torture room, they could accommodate Chu Yuanqing on small matters, but they wouldn't let Chu Yuanqing mess around on such a big matter. However, Chu Yuanqing didn't notice this. Holding the thing that Chu Xiao gave him, Chu Yuanqing went straight to the headquarters. On the way, Chu Yuanqing didn't open the box that Chu Xiao gave him. Although he was also curious about what was inside, Chu Yuanqing's character was still trustworthy. If Chu Xiao didn't let him open it, he naturally couldn't open it. When he came to the study, Guan Siyu was still dealing with official business. Seeing that Chu Yuanqing had come, Guan Siyu directly asked before he could speak, "Are you here for Chu Xiao's matter?" Chu Yuanqing was stunned. He swallowed what he was about to say and just nodded. "It's because of Chu Xiao. Brother Guan, since Chu Xiao joined the Guanzhong torture room, he has made a lot of contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. If you punish him now, I'm afraid that the other disciples of the Guanzhong torture room will be bitterly disappointed." Guan Siyu shook her head and said, "If it was something else, I can promise you, but Chu Xiao's matter is a bit too big. It must be dealt with strictly. He has made a lot of contributions to the Guanzhong torture room, but if he really offended his superiors and killed his colleagues, I will definitely not forgive him." Seeing that Chu Yuanqing still wanted to say something, Guan Siyu shook her head and said, "All right, Yuanqing, go out. From now on, don't get involved in this matter." Chu Yuanqing had known Guan Siyu since he was a child, so he naturally knew what kind of character Guan Siyu had. Hearing that Guan Siyu said it resolutely, Chu Yuanqing knew that he wouldn't relent, so he could only leave resentfully. After walking a distance away from the study, Chu Yuanqing remembered that he still had something to give to Mei Qinglian. However, as a man, wasn't it a little too reckless to break into Guan Xiyu's house? Just as Chu Yuanqing was in a dilemma, he happened to see Mei Qinglian walk in from outside. He quickly handed the box to Mei Qinglian and said softly, "Sister-in-law, this is what Chu Xiu wants to give you. I hope you can put in a good word for my brother in front of the hall master." When he said this, Chu Yuanqing lowered his head. He didn't even dare to look at Mei Qinglian's eyes. For some reason he didn't fear Guan Xiyu at all, but he was a little afraid of Mei Qinglian. After taking the box, a strange look appeared in Mei Qinglian's eyes. She slowly said, "As a woman, I shouldn't meddle in master's affairs. However, no matter what, Chu Xiu is an outstanding talent of the Guanzhong torture room's younger generation. It's better to handle this matter carefully. Don't worry, I'll talk to master." Hearing Mei Qinglian say this, Chu Yuanqing also breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. After nightfall, Chu Xiu was sitting in Chu Yuanqing's guest room with a cup of tea in his hand, as if he was waiting for someone. After a while, a black demonic aura rose in the room out of nowhere. As the demonic aura lingered, Mei Qinglian, who was wearing a red dress, walked out. Her red lips were like fire, and coupled with her cold face, it added to her charm. However, Mei Qinglian didn't look like an ordinary weak woman. Her aura was extremely powerful, and even Chu Xiu could feel the immense pressure. Mei Qinglian said calmly, "Chu Xiu, do you know that you're playing with fire now? You discovered my secret and even lured me here. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Chu Xiu poured a cup of tea for Mei Qinglian and said slowly, "If a martial Dao master wants to kill me, he doesn't even need to say a word. He can crush me with a finger. Since I'm fine now, it proves that Madam doesn't want to kill me yet, right?" Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in her eyes. Actually, she had always been interested in Chu Xiu. She had seen many young talents in the pugilistic world. She had even seen the little celestial master Zhang Qingjin before. However, it was the first time that someone from a humble background could reach the heights that Chu Xiu had. Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes twitched, and she said calmly, "I won't kill you now, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you in the next moment. Women are fickle, don't you know? Tell me, how did you know that I'm from the devil cult? Also, who are you? Why do you know the totem of the devil heart hall?" Mei Qinglian took out a piece of silk cloth. There was a complicated and strange pattern drawn on it. This was the totem of the Kunlun devil cult's devil heart hall. Other than the orthodox inheritors of the Kunlun devil cult, no one else knew about this thing. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "There are many people who practice devil arts in this world. However, to have such pure devil qi and hide it secretly, other than the Kunlun devil cult, I can't think of anyone else. If Madam is from the Kunlun devil cult, you'll naturally be able to recognize this thing. If you can't, I have other excuses to deal with it. As for why I know about this thing, it's very simple. It's because I'm also a disciple of the Kunlun devil cult. The devil is formless, and the great Tao is boundless. The holy fire refines the heart, and the devil flame devours the sky. I inherited the technique of the devil heart hall's hall master, 9 transformation devil heart, Nangong Wuming. Of course, it's not surprising that I know about this." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mei Qinglian was not as shocked as Mr. Liu in the past. This was because she had already guessed in this aspect. She had even tried to test Chu Xiu before. After all, Chu Xiu had too many devil arts. If he had obtained them all by chance, it would be too much of a coincidence. If not for the fact that Chu Xiu also knew the techniques of Buddhism and Taoism, Mei Qinglian could even confirm that Chu Xiu was from the devil cult. Later, after Chu Xiu obtained the heavenly demon dance, Mei Qinglian had also tried to test Chu Xiu's attitude towards the Kunlun devil cult. After all, whether it was the righteous Tao or the rogue cultivators in Jianghu, most people did not have a good impression of the devil cult. However, Chu Xiu was different. He did not seem to have a bad impression of the Kunlun devil cult. Mei Qinglian suddenly thought of what Chu Xiu had done in Eastern Qi. She asked, "Have you been in contact with the people of the phaseless devil sect?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, Yes, Mr. Lu from the Phaseless Devil sect helped me a lot. Mei Qinglian sneered and said, Mr. Lu? Are you talking about that kid Lu Jin? Their Phaseless Demon sect was extremely loyal to the Kunlun Demon sect. Even now they were still shouting Saint sect, as though they had gone mad. You can't be thinking that I'm the same as those fellows from the Phaseless Demon sect, selflessly helping you after hearing that you're a disciple of the Kunlun Demon sect, right? I forgot to tell you that although I have a relationship with the Kunlun Devil cult, I am not a direct descendant of the Kunlun Devil cult. I am a member of the Maiden Demon sect. How can you expect a sect that has been destroyed to be loyal to the Kunlun Devil cult? Not to mention that you are just a lucky person who accidentally obtained the inheritance of the Kunlun Devil cult. Even if you are the successor of the Patriarch Dugu, why should I help you selflessly? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He did not expect that Mei Qinglian's real identity was the same as Mr. Lu and the others. She was not a direct descendant of the Kunlun Devil cult. The Maiden Demon sect was one of the vassal sects of the Kunlun Devil cult in the past. Just like the Yunu Palace, there were only female disciples in the entire sect. However, the Maiden Demon sect was more unlucky. The Phaseless Devil sect was only hidden in the dark. Their own strength was still very strong, and they were still one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. However, the Maiden Demon sect had disappeared without a trace 100 years ago. Even the pugilistic world thought that the Maiden Demon sect had completely lost its inheritance. They did not expect that there was still a Mei Qinglian. Chapter 335. Chu Xiu didn't find Mei Qinglian's attitude strange at all. No matter how loyal the people of the devil cult were, they couldn't all be like the Phaseless Demon sect. After such a long time since the Kunlun Devil cult was destroyed, they were still so loyal and wanted to restore the devil cult. The Darkness Demon sect hadn't appeared in the pugilistic world for 100 years. Now that Mei Qinglian was hiding by Guan Xiyu's side, it was easy to imagine what she had experienced. So this time, when Chu Xiu pretended to be the successor of the devil cult, he didn't plan to use his identity to get Mei Qinglian to help him like he did with Mr. Lu. Chu Xiu looked at Mei Qinglian and smiled. Madam, you must be joking. The successor of the Patriarch Dugu doesn't need other people's help. I told you my identity, because I wanted to tell you one thing. You and I are not enemies. We have a chance to work together. Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with interest. You can't even protect yourself now, and you're still talking about working together with me? You killed Wei Jiuduan and destroyed the Wei clan. Do you know that because of you, the entire Guanzhong area almost fell into chaos? What do you have to work together with me? Chu Xiu said in a low voice. Since Hallmaster Guan didn't send people to attack me immediately, it means that I still have a chance. Moreover, I can guarantee that when it comes to the torture hall, the people on my side will definitely be the majority. However, Hallmaster Guan's side will need you, madam. Madam, you've been by his side for so many years. I believe that you'll have a great influence on him. In the Guanzhong torture room, with Hallmaster Guan's prestige, as long as he speaks, he'll have at least half the weight. As long as I can get through this, the position of Guanxi torture officer will definitely be mine. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, You're quite confident. However, I want to ask, what will I get from this? Don't tell me you really think that I should help you for free, just because you are a direct descendant of the devil cult? Chu Xiu smiled and said, Madam can get a lot of things, and that is my support. I believe that Madam should be able to tell that although Hallmaster Guan dotes on Madam, the other disciplinary officers are somewhat dissatisfied with Madam. They don't want a woman to meddle in the affairs of Guanxi. Once Madam shows any signs of doing so, they will resist and oppose you. With my identity and the fact that Madam has helped me this time, I will definitely stand behind you in the future. Helping me now is equivalent to helping yourself, Madam. Chu Xiu didn't ask what Mei Qinglian was plotting by Guan Xiyu's side, or what plans she had. Sometimes it was hard to be muddle-headed. Knowing too much was actually not good for oneself. However, Chu Xiu knew that Mei Qinglian definitely needed to obtain a large portion of power in the Guanzhong torture room. However, she clearly didn't have this opportunity now. Mei Qinglian was also present when the Guanzhong torture room was selecting people to participate in the God Weapon Conference. At that time, Mei Qinglian was only a spectator and didn't even say a word. Even so, it still caused the other disciplinary officers, and the head of the disciplinary officers to be somewhat dissatisfied. One could imagine how much resistance Mei Qinglian would face if she really began to meddle in the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. It had to be said that the martial world was actually somewhat unfair to women. Just like most aristocratic families and sects, although there were female disciples, other than sects like the Yu Palace that were all made up of women, it was extremely difficult for the female disciples of other sects to meddle in the affairs of the sections. It was basically impossible for them to reach a high position. After muttering to herself for a long time, Mei Qinglian suddenly smiled. Most of the time, her expression was cold. Now that she smiled like this, there was a kind of coquettish charm. I finally know how you were able to reach your current position. It's not only because of your strength, but also because of your mouth. Your ability to bewitch people's hearts is really good. No wonder you're the successor of my holy church. Chu Xiu said calmly. I'm not bewitching people's hearts. I'm just speaking the truth. Since we're all from the same holy church, there's a basis for cooperation. However, I only believe in benefits. Without benefits, it's useless no matter what I say. Madam can bring benefits to me now, and I can bring benefits to you in the future. That's enough. Back in Eastern Qi, Mr. Liu from the Phaseless Demon sect helped me greatly. I didn't mistreat him either. Most of the treasures that Prince and Li's residence has accumulated over the years have been taken away by the Phaseless Demon sect. A layer of black fog bloomed around Mei Qinglian. She took a deep look at Chu Xiu and said, I hope you can bring me benefits when the time comes. As soon as she finished speaking, Mei Qinglian's figure disappeared into the black fog, completely disappearing. Chu Xiu picked up the cup and drank the tea in it. He let out a long breath. It was very tiring to deal with people at the martial Dao Grandmaster level, especially when this person was a woman. Even Chu Xiu, who thought he had a good understanding of people's minds, couldn't figure out what a woman was thinking. However, the identity of the Kunlun devil cult was relatively useful. Without this identity, Mei Qinglian probably wouldn't even have the mood to talk nonsense with Chu Xiu. She would just slap him to death. However, at this time Chu Xiu had a very strange thought. He had pretended to be a disciple of the Kunlun devil cult twice. If he continued to pretend like this, would he really become a member of the Kunlun devil cult one day? At this time, in the punishment hall's headquarters, Mei Qinglian changed into a light blue dress. Compared to the red dress just now, she was more elegant and less aggressive. She walked into Guan Siyu's study with a bowl of chicken soup. Seeing that Guan Siyu was still deep in thought, she put the chicken soup on Guan Siyu's table and walked behind him. She gently squeezed his shoulder and said, Master, are you worried about Chu Xiu? Guan Siyu frowned and nodded. I didn't expect Chu Xiu to be so bold. He actually dared to kill his superior. His reasons and excuses are also very ridiculous. Anyone can see that the Wei family absolutely has no reason to kill Wei Jiuduan. They also don't dare to kill Wei Jiuduan. At this time, Guan Siyu was really at a loss. Although Chu Xiu had a clumsy excuse and sent people to dispose of the corpse to make it unrecognizable, saying that the corpse was damaged by the stellar energy during the fight, after careful consideration, Chu Xiu was still the most suspicious person. Severely punishing Chu Xiu would definitely not wrong him. However, if he was severely punished, it would not be good for the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu's talent and strength were clear for all to see. He was in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, and had the strength to kill someone at the unity of heaven and man realm. In any sect, he was a person who could hold up the facade. In the past, the Guanzhong torture room did not have such a person. Now they did. However, according to the laws of the Guanzhong torture room, they had to be crippled or even killed. That would be a great loss for the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, outsiders would mock the Guanzhong torture room for being blind and so on. It was not easy to be an iron-faced judge. In the past, when Guan Siyu had just taken over as hall master, he could cripple his own personal disciple without hesitation for the sake of the Guanzhong torture room's laws. But now, for the benefit of the Guanzhong torture room, He was not sure if he should kill Chu Xiu. At this time Mei Qinglian's hand, which was pressed on Guan Xiyu's back, suddenly moved. A strange rhythm floated through the entire study. It was formless and silent. Guan Xiyu did not sense it at all. Mei Qinglian softly said, "Actually, it would be better if Master thought about this from a different angle. Don't you know what kind of person Wei Jiuduan is? That old thing is greedy beyond measure. Although we have to rely on him to guard the Guanxi area all these years, he has tarnished the reputation of the Guanzhong torture room. Wei Jiuduan's death does not affect the Guanzhong torture room at all. But what about Chu Xiu? He is a talent of the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. Regardless of whether he is killed or crippled, the loss is the strength of the Guanzhong torture room. On one side is a talent of the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room, and on the other side is an old man who deserves to die. The choice is already very obvious. We can even give Chu Xiu the position of the Guanxi torture officer, and let him replace Wei Jiuduan to guard the Guanxi area. Chu Xiu has the strength and reputation. I believe he will do better than Wei Jiuduan." Guan Xiyu closed his eyes slightly. He had always been full of energy, but now he suddenly felt a little tired and even wanted to sleep. Narrowing his eyes, Guan Xiyu said in a low voice, "But if we just let Chu Xiu be like this and even give him the position of the Guanxi torture officer, isn't it equivalent to destroying the laws of the Guanzhong torture room? And if we help Chu Xiu do something like this, I'm afraid he will go even more overboard in the future." Mei Qinglian smiled and said, "The laws of the Guanzhong torture room are to make the Guanzhong torture room stronger. But right now, not punishing Chu Xiu can already make the Guanzhong torture room stronger. Since this is the case, why do we have to rigidly follow the laws of the Guanzhong torture room? Moreover, there is no direct evidence of Chu Xiu's death, right? As for Chu Xiu, Master doesn't need to worry at all. Wei Jiuduan is just a mediocre good-for-nothing, and he is greedy for power. That's why he died in the hands of Chu Xiu. With Master's strength and status, are you afraid that you can't suppress Chu Xiu?" Guan Xiyu patted Mei Qinglian's hand and sighed. "Madam, you are still thinking of everything. I am old, and there are some things that I can't think of thoroughly." Mei Qinglian gently squeezed Guan Xiyu's shoulder and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Master, you are in the prime of your life. How can you be old? It's just that there are too many things to do in the Guanzhong torture room, and it has distracted you. It's a pity that I'm just a woman. I can only give you ideas in the dark, but I can't help you with your worries directly." Guan Xiyu smiled and said, "I am already so old. How can I not be considered old? In the past, when I first took over the Guanzhong torture room, I didn't feel tired as easily as I do now. Forget it. Go and rest first. We will see what others say tomorrow." Chapter 336. Early in the morning, in the Guanzhong torture room's main hall, 3 torturers from all over Guanzhong had come. Of course, one of them would never be able to come. Only Si Ming, the 3rd leader of the Criminal Investigation Division, had come. The other 2 leaders hadn't arrived. The Criminal Investigation Division represented the Guanzhong torture room's most elite fighting force. Typically, they wouldn't get involved in such matters. Si Ming was only here to listen on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Division. He wouldn't express any opinions. Wei Jiuduan's death had caused a huge commotion. It wasn't as if no one in charge of the Guanzhong torture room had died accidentally. However, Wei Jiuduan could be said to be the first to die at the hands of his own subordinates. As for how to deal with Chu Xiu, this was definitely a major matter that concerned the future of the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, the other people in charge of the Guanzhong torture room had to express their opinions. In the torture hall's headquarters, Guan Xiyu looked at the people below and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, how should we deal with Chu Xiu's matter?" Yin Batong was the first to speak. "Hallmaster, is there a need to ask such questions? Does Chu Xiu think we're all idiots? He actually used such a clumsy excuse to deceive us. Wei Jiuduan was clearly killed by him." Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew that Wei Jiuduan and Yin Batong weren't on good terms. There was quite a bit of enmity between them. Now that Wei Jiuduan was dead, Yin Batong should be clapping his hands in celebration. In reality, Im Batong was really clapping his hands in celebration. However, Wei Jiuduan had a grudge against him, and so did Chu Xiu. Of his 2 disciples, one had been crippled by Chu Xiu, and the other was suspected to have been killed by Chu Xiu. He had to settle this score with Chu Xiu no matter what. It was good that Wei Jiuduan was dead. It was even better that Chu Xiu was dead. Hearing Im Batong say this, Chu Simo said calmly, "Everything in the Guanzhong torture room requires evidence. Do you have evidence to prove that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jiuduan?" Last time, when Im Batong had caused trouble for Chu Xiu, Chu Simo had jumped out to stop him. This had already displeased Im Batong. He didn't know when Chu Simo had started colluding with Chu Xiu. Im Batong snorted. "Evidence? Is there any need for evidence when even an idiot can see through it?" Chu Simo retorted. "You don't have proof, but I do." At the time of the incident, other than Chu Xiu's subordinates, there were also the Wei family members who were all killed. However, Wei Jiuduan's adopted son, Yangling, was there. Right now, Yangling has been summoned to the main hall. You might not believe the words of others, but do you still not believe the words of Wei Jiuduan's adopted son? Chu Simo said to Guan Xiu, "Hall master, we'll know once we ask him." "We don't have physical evidence, but we have witnesses." Guan Xiu nodded. "Go and bring Yangling over." Moments later, Yangling walked into the hall with some apprehension. To be honest, although Yangling was Wei Jiuduan's adopted son, he hadn't been to the hall many times. He hadn't seen so many important figures in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he was Wei Jiuduan's adopted son in name, he was actually just an errand boy. Wei Jiuduan didn't really want to groom him as his successor. Of course, he wouldn't bring him to the hall to help him build up his connections. Yangling nervously cupped his hands at Guan Xiu and the others. "Greetings, hall master and sirs," Im Batong said coldly. "You should know why we called you over. Previously in Guanxi, you said that it was the Wei family who killed your adoptive father. I know you have your concerns and don't dare to speak the truth. Now in front of us you can speak freely. Who killed Wei Jiuduan?" Yangling said with a puzzled look. "Lord Yin, what do you mean? I have no concerns. My adoptive father was killed by the Wei family." Im Batong frowned when he heard that. Previously, he had also investigated Yangling's matter. He discovered that Yangling and Chu Xiu should not have any relationship, and the 2 of them even had conflicts. Wei Jiuduan wanted to take care of his adopted son, and was afraid of Chu Xiu, so he gave the state capital that should have been given to Chu Xiu to Yangling, and made him the patrol envoy. Therefore, the relationship between the 2 of them should not be good. Previously, when Yangling said that the Wei family killed Wei Jiuduan, Im Batong thought that Chu Xiu was pressuring Yangling, so that he didn't dare to speak the truth. But now it seemed that this wasn't the case. Im Batong couldn't help but emphasize his tone, and snorted coldly. "Yangling, think carefully before you speak. This is the headquarters. The hall master is watching. I'll give you another chance. Who killed Wei Jiuduan?" Facing the aura of an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm, Yangling couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. However, he still gritted his teeth and said, "I'm telling the truth. Even if you ask me 100 times, it was the Wei family patriarch who killed my adoptive father." Just as Im Batong was about to say something, Chu Simo suddenly said, "Enough. This is the headquarters. Do you still want to confess under torture?" At that moment, Guan Xiu also glared at Im Batong and said to Yangling, "You may leave." Yangling nodded as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden, and quickly retreated. Seeing Yangling's behavior, everyone present was a little puzzled. Yangling was Wei Jiuduan's adoptive son. Even if Chu Xiu threatened him, he still didn't dare to speak the truth in the headquarters, right? Everyone also couldn't understand what method Chu Xiu used to actually make Yangling speak up for him so obediently. Guan Xiu looked at Si Ming and Xiao Yi and said in a deep voice, "The 2 of you tell me, what do you think about this matter?" Im Batong stared at Xiao Yi and Si Ming. Right now he and Chu Simo each had their own opinions. If these 2 also agreed to punish Chu Xiu, even Guan Xiu would have to consider the opinions of the majority. Si Ming said, "The Criminal Investigations Division has never cared about these matters. We will do whatever the hall master says. Siming chose to abstain. This was very normal. After all, he had no relationship with Chu Xiu, but he didn't have any ill feelings towards Chu Xiu. The existence of the Criminal Investigations Division was the elite force of the Guanzhong torture room to kill people. The Criminal Investigations Division didn't want to care about these messy matters, and there was no need for them to care. Xiao Yi pondered by the side. After a while, he knocked on the table and said, I feel that this matter should be investigated carefully. I'm afraid you don't know Chu Xiu's status in the underworld. Even among the top 10 warriors on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu's reputation is considered to be in the front. My Guanzhong torture room has been silent for so long. Do you know what the image of the Guanzhong torture room in the underworld was in the past? It was just a constable who specialized in solving cases. It was lukewarm and would forever be a subordinate in the underworld. Now Chu Xiu is famous in the underworld. He came from the Guanzhong torture room. When the people of the underworld mention Chu Xiu, they can't forget the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu's existence can also tell the entire underworld that the Guanzhong torture room also has the ability to nurture such an outstanding person. Through Chu Xiu, the people of the underworld can also know how powerful the Guanzhong torture room is. To put it simply, the current Chu Xiu is the face of the Guanzhong torture room. We can investigate and deal with this matter, but we must be careful. Otherwise, if we destroy our own face, it will be a joke. Xiao Yi said so much, but he didn't make it clear whether he supported punishing Chu Xiu or letting Chu Xiu go. However, the people present weren't stupid. They could clearly hear the meaning in his words. He was actually on the side of Chu Xiu. Although there was no direct evidence that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jieduan, he did it too blatantly and couldn't stand scrutiny. Xiao Yi said that this matter needed to be investigated carefully. He had laid out so much for Chu Xiu's role in the Guanzhong torture room. Didn't he mean to let Chu Xiu go? As soon as Xiao Yi said this, Im Buotong's expression darkened. To be honest, Im Buotong never expected Xiao Yi to stand on Chu Xiu's side. Among the 4 torture masters of Guanzhong, Xiao Yi was the youngest and the strongest. Although he usually seemed frivolous, he carried a lot of weight. Once he made a decision, it was more effective than Yin Batong and Chu Simo combined. At this time, Yin Batong could only look at Guan Siyu. If Guan Siyu insisted on punishing Chu Xiu, then it would be useless even if everyone stood on Chu Xiu's side. In the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu's prestige was enough to take up more than half of the weight. Among the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room, the ones with the most weight were the previous hall master, Chu Kuanga, and the current hall master, Guan Siyu. Chu Kuanga completely relied on his own strength and personal charisma, while Guan Siyu led the Guanzhong torture room to prosperity and confirmed the status and strength of the Guanzhong torture room. Only the 2 of them had the right to have the final say in the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, Guan Siyu was also frowning in thought. To be honest, he never expected Chu Xiu's prestige in the Guanzhong torture room to be so high. It was one thing for Chu Simo to speak up for him, but now even Xiao Yi was speaking up for Chu Xiu. This was enough to prove Chu Xiu's value. Xiao Yi didn't form cliques in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he usually appeared to be a little lazy, he was the person with the least petty thoughts in the Guanzhong torture room. He was also a person who truly thought for the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. Even he had stated Chu Xiu's value, which proved that severely punishing Chu Xiu now was indeed not beneficial to the Guanzhong torture room. However, Guan Siyu vaguely felt that it seemed a little inappropriate to let Chu Xiu off just like that. But just as this thought rose in his mind, he couldn't help but think of what Mei Qinglian had said to him yesterday. Guan Siyu subconsciously said, "In that case, we really have to be more cautious in this matter. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room will be the one to suffer. Let's put Wei Jieduan's death aside for now. Just send a few people to keep an eye on it. Chu Xiu has nothing to do with this case for the time being." Hearing Guan Siyu say this, Yin Batong suddenly looked unlucky. Although Guan Siyu didn't say that he would completely clear Chu Xiu of suspicion, he had already said that this case would be put aside for now, so it was no different from ending it. Chapter 337. Chu Xiu had said that Mei Qinglian had a great influence on Guan Siyu. And that was indeed the case. Regardless of whether it was to find an ally for himself or for Chu Xiaoda to find a backer in the future, he definitely wouldn't suffer a loss by helping Chu Xiao. On the contrary, the higher Chu Xiao climbed, the more advantageous it would be for him. Chu Xiao cupped his hands at Guan Siyu and said, "Don't worry, Hall Master. If I become the disciplinary officer, I can suppress all of this within a month. I'll make the Guanxi land quiet down, and there won't be any unnecessary sounds." Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "The Zhang family's actions are simply a joke." Following Yuqi into the hall, Chu Xiao cupped his hands at Guan Siyu and said, "Greetings, Hall Master." If Guan Siyu had convicted Chu Xiao just now, Yuqi was prepared to tell Guan Siyu all of this information. But now that Chu Xiao had survived this calamity, he naturally wouldn't say anything to offend Chu Xiao. Yin Batong snorted coldly and turned to Guan Siyu. He cupped his hands and said, "Hall Master, the penal officer is different from other positions. One must be cautious." In the past, when Wei Jiuduan was still around, he relied on his prestige to suppress the Guanxi region. But now, Chu Xiao hasn't even come to power, but he has already caused the Guanxi region to be filled with resentment. If Chu Xiao becomes the penal officer, the Guanxi region will definitely be in chaos. Guan Siyu nodded and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiao, let's put aside the matter regarding Wei Jiuduan for now. Now that Chu Simo has suggested that you take over as Guanxi's penal officer, what do you have to say?" Chu Xiao smiled and said, "It's very simple. If Hall Master is determined to punish me, then it won't be you, Brother Yuqi. I probably won't have a chance to defend myself. And since Brother Yuqi is here, I reckon I've almost survived this calamity." Guanzhong is the Guanzhong torture room's Guanzhong. When did the Zhang family have the right to tell us what to do? Wei would find out about this sooner or later. However, Guan Siyu had gathered everyone to discuss matters early in the morning, and he hadn't had time to inform Guan Siyu. Before Yin Batong could continue speaking, Chu Xiao said coldly, "Also, does Lord Yin mean that you look down on my 5-cheese origin realm? It's not wrong that the disciplinary master wants to look at ability and strength. Although I, Chu Xiao, am only at the 5-cheese collecting mind, it's not like I haven't killed someone at the oneness of heaven and man realm before. Since Lord Yin has doubts about my strength, then fine, why don't we go out and have a spar? Let's see if I'm qualified to take over this position." Yin Batong choked on Chu Xiao's words. Everyone in Guanzhong knew that before Wei Jiuduan died, Chu Xiao's power in Guanxi was second only to Wei Jiuduan. This was the source of the conflict between the two. If it was so easy to choose the disciplinary master, Guan Siyu would not have let Wei Jiuduan sit in this position for so long. However, Chu Xiao couldn't even fight for this position, so was there a need to be humble? There were many people who didn't want him to sit in this position. No one in the main hall dared to inform Chu Xiao. So how did he know the outcome? As expected, just as Chu Xiao finished speaking, Yin Batong sneered and said, "Shameless boasting. You, Chu Xiao, are just a junior martial artist who just joined the Guanzhong torture room. You're also at the 5-cheese collecting mind realm. What right do you have to take over as the disciplinary master?" This time, Chu Simo stood up to help Chu Xiao, but it had nothing to do with Chu Xiaoda. This was because he also saw the potential in Chu Xiao. Guan Siyu looked at Chu Xiao with rapt attention and said in a low voice, "Is this a military order?" Everyone present heard it. "If you can do it, your position as the disciplinary master will be secured. If you can't, you won't even be able to keep your position as patrol inspector." Chu Xiao had been summoned to Guanzhong this time, and his future was unknown. It would be surprising if those people who wished for nothing more than for him to die did not stir up some trouble. Guan Siyu coughed and said, "All right, we're all members of the Guanzhong torture room. It's not the critical moment. What's the point of fighting and killing among our own people?" If it were anyone else who encountered Guan Siyu's question, they might be a little humble. Chu Simo didn't have much of a relationship with Chu Xiao, but ever since Eastern Qi had returned, his foster son, Chu Xiaoda, had strongly recommended Chu Xiao to Chu Simo. He had told Chu Simo that as long as he stood on Chu Xiao's side, there would definitely be benefits in the future. Yuqi laughed bitterly and said, "You're really open-minded. However, your guess is correct. Wei Juduan's matter has been temporarily put aside by the hall master, so there's basically nothing for you to do. However, Lord Chu Simo's sudden nomination of you as the Guanxi disciplinary master has caused quite a stir. Currently, the hall master is calling for you. Chu Xiu's future was limitless. This was publicly acknowledged. Even if Yuqi was Guan Xiyu's personal disciple, there was no harm in forming a good relationship with Chu Xiu. However, Yin Batong had brought up the matter again, so he could only tell the truth. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Of course it's a military order. If I can't even handle such a small matter, I won't even be able to be the disciplinary master, let alone take my position." Chu Simo spread his hands and said, "If you don't want Chu Xiu to be the Guanxi disciplinary master, why don't you recommend someone more reliable? Tell me, other than Chu Xiu, who else is qualified to be the disciplinary master?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's my responsibility." Before anyone else could say anything, Yin Batong immediately stood up and objected. "What kind of joke is this? The matter of Chu Xiu killing Wei Juduan hasn't been concluded yet, and you actually want him to be the Guanxi disciplinary master? Does that mean that Chu Xiu hasn't committed a crime, and has instead performed meritorious deeds?" With that, Guan Xiyu turned his gaze to Yuqi. Most of the information that was handed to Guan Xiyu would have to go through Yuqi. When Guan Xiyu had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room, he had also ruthlessly killed many martial arts factions that dared to despise and challenge the dignity of the Guanzhong torture room. As an iron-faced judge, he was not only merciless towards his own people, but he was also merciless towards outsiders. This time, although no one had seen Chu Xiu kill Wei Juduan, he had directly blown up the Wei family's patriarch in front of everyone. This was a truly powerful battle record that no one could ignore. If they had to promote a disciplinary master from the Guanxi area, there was really no one else but Chu Xiu. For example, now Guan Xiyu, who had originally been prepared to treat this matter seriously, had directly spoken up and set this matter in stone. Chu Xiu had been able to kill the state of unity of heaven and man at the five qis toward the origin realm. As long as he could survive this tribulation, he would definitely become a big shot in the Guanzhong torture room in the future. Chu Xiu was not surprised by these matters. He had a great reputation in the Guanxi area, but no matter how great his reputation was, there were more people who hated him. When he saw Yuqi coming, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry. He smiled and said, "It seems that I have survived this tribulation." Previously, when Chu Xiu had killed Feng Wuling, the people who had seen that battle were only some unaffiliated cultivators from the pugilistic world. There were no experts, so their descriptions were somewhat unclear. This also led to most people not believing that Chu Xiu had the combat power to kill the state of unity of heaven and man. This included Yin Batong. Guan Xiyu frowned and asked, "Chu Xiu, what do you have to say about these two matters?" The Guanzhong torture room needs dignity. In recent years, the Guanzhong torture room has been peaceful. Everyone has been recuperating, but some people have forgotten what it means to be in awe. Yuqi asked curiously, "How do you know? Why are you so confident?" Guan Xiyu frowned and asked, "What's going on?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and cupped his hands. "Thank you for the reminder, Brother Yuqi." At that moment, Chu Simo suddenly said, "Hall Master, the position of Guanxi's torturer is still vacant. I suggest that Chu Xiu be the torturer." After the Guanzhong torture room had been peaceful all these years, some people had indeed forgotten the dignity of the Guanzhong torture room in the past. He was one with heaven and man, and he was also the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room. He was a warrior of the older generation, so it was normal for him to defeat Chu Xiu. However, if he were to lose, even if it was a draw, he would be the one to be embarrassed. Therefore, he didn't wish to fight Chu Xiu because he would be at a disadvantage no matter what. Yin Batong opened his mouth, but he couldn't name anyone. There were many experts at the one with heaven and man realm in the Guanzhong torture room, but they all had their own positions. Chu Xiu's domineering attitude might make others uncomfortable, but it suited Guan Xiyu's taste. Since Chu Xiu was fine, there was no need for Yuqi to deliberately keep a distance from Chu Xiu. Instead, he revealed some information to Chu Xiu without any harm. At that moment, Guan Siyu said in a deep voice. Go and ask Chu Xiu to come in. Not everyone can be the torturer. Whether Chu Xiu is qualified to be the torturer depends on himself. Yuqi said in a low voice. There was news that came in the middle of the night yesterday. The martial arts factions in Guangzhou were secretly discussing that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jiuduan. They also described some of the dirty dealings between Chu Xiu and Wei Jiuduan very clearly. It seems that it was done by people from within the Guangzhou torture room. As for the Guanqi Yuan Zhouzhang family, they joined forces with more than 10 factions to submit a petition, requesting the Guangzhou torture room to severely punish a lunatic like Chu Xiu who violated the rules and killed the innocent. Yin Buotong's face turned red from Chu Xiu's domineering attitude. But to be honest, he really didn't want to fight Chu Xiu. It wasn't that he didn't dare, but he didn't want to. As soon as he finished speaking, Yuqi immediately went to ask Chu Xiu to come in. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Yin Buotong and sneered. Lord Yin, do you think I'm not qualified? But the Guangzhou torture room's promotion has always been based on merit and strength, not seniority. What are the requirements of the torturer? To be able to keep the Guangzhou and the 4 regions under control. At present, in Guanxi, other than me Chu Xiu, who else can keep others under control? Situ Xing or Feng Hua. Call them in and see if they dare to say that they are stronger than me, Chu Xiu. Yin Buotong thought that he was much stronger than the Wei family's old ancestor, that coward who was afraid of death. But he still didn't have the confidence to face Chu Xiu. In fact, Chu Xiu had arrived at the main hall a long time ago, but he had been drinking tea in a study room. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.